Yeah.
You know, I think he was like, he later ate it. Like, you know, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
But like, people don't want to see comedy and stuff. They want to see things that they get offended by. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be honest, anybody, if you go out into the world and you want to find ways to be offended, you will find it. Hands down, you will find it.
What's cooking, everybody? I am joined in the bunker today by my longtime friend, Mr. Josh Ilutiza. Back in college, Josh and I would have some of the wildest conversations about the hardest-hitting political and social issues out there. And in a lot of ways, those talks served as the genesis for what this show is today. So it's only natural that I brought Josh in front of the cameras and mics to do it for real. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, if you haven't used the link in my description for my friends over at 8 Sleep to take a look at buying either the 8 Sleep Pod Pro mattress or the 8 Sleep Pod Pro cover, hear me out. It's very, very important. 8 Sleep is the first tech company to go to mattresses. And I say that because you have all these other companies, I won't name names, but they're mattress companies, and they've tried tech over the years, and it never really works. So when you have an actual Silicon Valley company coming in and saying, we're going to solve the problem of sleep and we're going to leverage something that we create first before we even make the mattress itself, well, that's pretty powerful. So obviously a mattress is a big investment, and you may have one that you're at least comfortable on right now and you don't want to get one. So I'm going to focus on the second product, which is around half the price, which is the Pod Pro cover. And I say this because A, I use the Pod Pro cover, and B, it's the same exact thing. It does everything that the mattress does itself. You just don't get a full mattress. You get the cover that you put on top of your mattress. So it will measure your sleep stages throughout the night. It will measure things like your REM and your body temperature. And within the first night's sleep, you will get full optimization to your preferences. So at the end of the day, it's going to feel like you slept 8 hours when maybe you only really slept 6. Very, very powerful stuff. Anyway, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you're on YouTube right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, and leave a like and comment on this video, if you would, please. To everyone who has been leaving a 5-star review with a comment on Apple Podcasts, thank you. They're great. They continue to roll in. And if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, it is a big help to me because it allows new listeners who are coming to the page deciding whether or not they're going to give the show a try to get a feel for what they can expect before they actually hit the button and listen. Finally, to everyone who has been sharing their favorite episode or episodes with one friend each week to spread the good old word of mouth, thank you. That is the absolute best thing we can do here. So to those of you who enjoy the show and haven't done that, if you can pick out a friend who does listen to podcasts this week and send them maybe this episode, maybe this will be your favorite, but send them your favorite episode, that would be absolutely amazing. And again, thank you to everyone who has already done that. I really appreciate all the audience building you guys are doing on my behalf. It's an amazing thing. That said, you know what it is. I'm Julian Dorey, and this is TRENDIFIER. Let's go! This is one of the great questions in our culture. Where is the nuance? You're giving opinions and calling them facts. You feel me? Everyone understands this, but few seem to do it. If you don't like the status quo, start asking questions. I'm looking at that guy going, that guy thinks I'm a moron. I'm going to do the opposite of what that guy wants to do.
Yep.
And I think that's what we see with a lot of people. And that leads to then they get that cognitive bias of not trusting it, you know? And they're like, well, here's why. You know, they have to like back up why they're like, I will not do it. And I empathize with that. I do.
Yeah, and this is going way back, but you go back to the 30s with, you know, the Tuskegee syphilis trial that the CDC was doing. That was like when the government was, they did a whole study on African Americans and syphilis, and they basically promised them free healthcare.
Oh, I don't know about this.
But this was like one of the biggest like stories that really like
Pull that mic in a little bit.
Hit the ground running for African American distrust within the healthcare industry. To the Tuskegee syphilis trials, they were told at the beginning it was only supposed to last 6 months, I believe, ended up lasting 40 years.
Jesus.
Not only that, but to another extent, this started in the 30s. Penicillin was available in the 40s. They were not giving them penicillin at all.
Jesus Christ.
And the African American, I believe there was about 600 African Americans in this trial. But when that story came out, and this was like a government sponsored trial, CDC, you name it, like they were backing this. So yeah, from then on, and then when you go a little bit more today, the access to good healthcare. There's a huge difference between Medicare and Medicaid. There's, people who can afford healthcare. It's terrible. United States, just the cost of it is so high. There's a lot of discrepancies within the healthcare industry, and and that's why a lot of people are now like they're pushing when you're black in this country, like you want a black doctor, you want someone who you shouldn't go around assuming that someone's not going to give you the best healthcare because of the way you look. You don't want to, but you also never know. And especially even I myself has been looking for those other African American doctors who just they'll have the best interest out for you, and especially like with dermatology, skincare. Yeah. There's just difference, and I think another side of that is like the number of black doctors that are out there and stuff like that. And the point of this, obviously, is not to go to the color, race of what you look like for your healthcare, but given the circumstances and given the history of this country, we do have a lot of mistrust. We are seeking people who look like us to take care of us, and that's the stage that we're at now.
I want to read this real quick and then come right to the point you made. I just want to give the context of what you brought up because I had never heard of this. So it's behind us on the screen, but it is the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. I'm reading that, people. I'm not saying that. Yep. Just gotta make sure out there. You never know. Straight off of Wikipedia. So anyway, it was an ethically abusive study conducted between 1932 and 1972 by the United States Public Health Service and the Centers for the CDC involved. Yep. There we go. The purpose of this study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. Although the African American men who participated in the study were told they were receiving free health care from the federal government of the United States, they were not. The service started the study in 1932 in collaboration with Tuskegee University, then the Tuskegee Institute, a historically black college in Alabama. In the study, investigators enrolled a total of 600 impoverished African-American sharecroppers from Macon County, Alabama. Of these men, 399 had latent syphilis with a control group of 201 men who were not infected. As an incentive for participation in the study, the men were promised free medical care, but were deceived by the PHS, who never informed subjects of their diagnosis and disguised placebos, ineffective methods, and diagnostics procedures as treatment. I'm going to cut off reading there. There is, to be clear, there's a lot more below that. Yeah. But this is important because and it's going to tie right into the point you were making that I want to come to. But you're talking about, I think the way you said it was there's more of an emphasis on services, or be it medical, whatever, where you are with a person of your same color and stuff like that. And there's such a focus on it these days. Two things. Number one, in history, we have seen things that are so bad like this that are then stories and they get passed down. Father tells his son about it, son tells his son about it, and so on and so on. You will see things like, even like recent history. We've been talking about the Holocaust a little bit in some recent episodes here. Yep. And there's a reason that the Jewish people are so great at sticking together. I actually think it's an awesome thing in this country where, some people give them shit like, oh, why can't you be like the rest of us and assimilate on everything? They stick together well because it's been passed down to them, not just the Holocaust, by the way, shit before that, too. This goes back thousands of years. It's been passed down to them that there are certain things that if they don't do that, they can get in deep shit, and it's not their fault, obviously. So you see these effects. You see that from the genealogy of ancestors who understand what it's like to have nothing or understand what it's like to be in a shit situation. And so for you to talk about the emphasis now on being treated by a person of the same color, it's almost like we've come full circle on that, because there are still things that, do we see people that we know of doing Tuskegee-like tests today on behalf of the federal government? We do not. But does that mean that everything's fixed? No, it is not at all. And so people look back on stuff like this, and it puts up that guard of like, remember what they've done to us before. It can happen again, which that's a very important point. We don't pay attention to that shit. Stuff can happen again. Like the minute society starts saying, oh, that happened, it'll never happen again, it's going to happen. Even this pandemic, 100 years ago, it happened. It happened again. There's things that happen in history over time. It's cycles, fourth turning type shit. So what I want to get your thoughts on, though, is that emphasis that's come back around full circle with being treated, or not just in medical, like with anything, services, doing business,
like,
government.
Your politicians, you want them to look like you. You want them to make sure they're looking out for you.
Correct. How much of that do you think is positive versus how much is negative? I'm going to leave it there for now, because I have thoughts on both sides, but I want to see where you stand on that.
So sometimes stubbornness can put you in a good place. Sometimes stubbornness can leave you in the hole. And you really never know the answer to that until the end of it, when you look back on whether or not you made the right decision to be stubborn or not. I'm hoping that the people who are deciding not to get vaccinated right now don't have to have that revelation, like, oh man, like I should have, like I never want to like wish pain or on them at all. But when you pass it down to someone, it can be hard, because you're also changing. Because you kind of hit on this, but generational trauma is a big thing.
Yes.
And just speaking from personal experience, is something that I've dealt with. My parents have gone through a different time, and when they were raising me, there were just certain precautions that they instilled in me that I carried on, and some of that put me in the right path, but also some of that, I internalized a little bit too much and affected the way I've had relationships, in the future. So it's all about how you carry it. I would say that. Listen to it, internalize it. There's like someone, like your parent or grandparent, telling you about something that happened in the past. Don't shrug it off because it happened in the past. Listen to their story. It's an important story, and it's their story, and it happened. But internalize it. Look at your resources now, and you choose how to move forward with it. And don't let it, degrade your mindset. If, this is not what happened, but, if my parents said, hey, you know what? I had a tough time, dealing with white people in my life. Don't trust any of them that you meet. And I went along my day going to these, boarding schools and private schools with that mindset. I don't think I would have had the best time.
No.
And nor the best learning experience at all. But there are people who receive that. Or let me switch it up. If you're a white person and your dad says, like, hey, I had a bad dealing with this black guy, when you see them, hold your bag, don't trust them. That obviously is negative. I mean, that's why we have racism to this day. It's like it's passed down. It's not something that you're born with. Something that's passed down. It's generational trauma that is just passed down from generation to generation, and we have to be the ones to choose what's right and what's wrong. So yeah, I'll put it at that.
There's a couple different things I would want to ask you about in there, but I want to go right at the idea that it causes more of seeing color. And this is where I struggle with some of this stuff, because it stresses me out when I think about this stuff, less when I'm talking about it. To me, a great part about this platform is that it's been very easy to do that, even with other white people too. Like I've had a lot of great conversations across the spectrum, and you learn a lot about how people look at this and how they think. But it stresses me out to think about all the people who legitimately feel a certain way based on things in society that are more likely to go wrong for them. I mean, to use a very prime example, like the Black Americans' relationship with the police force. Very common one, right? And also truth to it. 100% truth to it. It then leads to, though, sometimes the opposite effect. And what I mean by that is the way that as a Black person, if I were dealing with that, I think I would want to have it fixed is to have a day where I knew in my head that if I were Black, white, or whatever's in between, if I got pulled over by a cop, I had the same exact chance of something going wrong. And preferably, let's look at it positively and say the same exact percentage chance of everything going fine, right? That's a perfect utopia world. Agree?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that the way that the solutions then get brought to the table in this case is more of, we want you to see that we are whatever race we are, rather than let's become all the same because we all are human fucking beings. And so I remember growing up in a world where, look, I think my mom taught me really, really well on this at a very young age. You talk about environment, another point you made in there, critical. Like, she was always, everyone's everyone, everyone's a human being. Like, there's no difference between you and anyone else. And so when I went to school with people of all different types of races, when I was young, I didn't see them that way. I tell a story that legitimately one time I had a new friend who had come to the school who was Black, and my mom was asking me about my new friend I had been talking about. Which one is he? Because there were like 30 kids in my class.
I remember the story.
And I said, oh, he's the one that's like really tan. Yeah. Like he's really, really tan. And my mom's like holding her mouth up front like, okay, I got it, right? But that's how I was taught. And it was such a beautiful thing. And as I got older, because of society, now I see race. Like, and that's not a positive to me. Like, there is a thought that goes through me, maybe not with you because we've been friends forever, but there is a thought that goes through me when I see someone new, like this internal thing. I don't even realize it's happening, where I'm like, oh, this is an Asian guy. Oh, this is a Black guy. Oh, this is a whatever guy. And it's like, to me, I hate that because it's almost like, in a way, I'm not, but you are, by definition, defining someone before you meet them, and you're defining them by a look that they have. And last I checked, the way it works for all of us is that, yes, even though we have problems in society where there are people who do that and use it for power and do it in wrong ways, and we need to fix that.
For sure.
The way that society is supposed to be set up for the good people out there, and I'd like to think I'm one of the good ones, is that we all have the same abilities. Right? We can all do the same things.
For sure.
You know, some people might be better at certain things than other people, but at the end of the day, we can pick out something we're good at and we can go after it.
For sure. And I think there has to be a balance within that too, because I think a colorblind approach isn't also the solution either. Like, I feel like you shouldn't pass judgment on someone by the look of them, but like, when you see me as a Black. Like, that's part of who I am, and that's a part of my experience. So it's like, yes, from a child's standpoint, from a child's eye, yes, children. Even when you see children interact with each other, like all those viral videos of a Black kid hugging a white kid or vice versa, it always goes viral because with everything going on right now, it's just like what we need to see. But also, I feel like children are as innocent as it gets, and they don't see color. From that standpoint, yes, it's important. And I feel like as we get older, and this is why it's like you just have to acknowledge history. You just have to acknowledge the state that we're in, and you have to acknowledge the past. It's important to see your fellow man's predicament, and it's not to say like because he's Black, he has this monolithic Black experience that all Black people have. I'm not saying that at all.
That's important.
Get to know him, but also acknowledge, hey, like if you're at work and you have a Black coworker and George Floyd situation like just happened. You shouldn't have the mindset like, oh, he's not Black. He's just like every other. I'm colorblind. To not be like, hey, man, I just wanted to check in to see like how you're feeling with everything that's going on right now. From a standpoint, I feel like you have to acknowledge who the person is and know that, hey, you know what? Because they are this race, they could be having a difficult time right now.
That's a touchy one.
It is.
That's because I don't.
It is. And not to say that...
I don't know where I stand on that.
Yeah.
I can see that both ways. I can see that as, from the perspective you're seeing it as, if you're just pretending it didn't happen, it's almost like you ignore the fact that someone else may be feeling a certain way about it. And regardless of whether it's that issue or something else, if you have a coworker, a friend who might be feeling a certain way as a human being, what do you want to do? You want to check in and see that they're doing okay.
Yeah.
That's one side of it. The other side of it is, do you then, God damn, I can't think of a fucking word to say. And I don't want to say the word. And
I'm not saying coddle them and like hug them and like you're a complete stranger. It's like, oh, is your experience? Like, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Like, there's ways to do it. There's ways to go about it.
Like, start the conversation is more what you're getting at.
Yeah, start the conversation. And I feel like it's more talked about now, especially within like the professional world, because it can be an HR thing. But
how much of that is bullshit, though?
I feel like most of it is. I mean, you have to. You're a business, and once you're a business, you're marketing yourself, and you can't look a certain way.
Do you know who Brian Moynihan is?
Do not.
He's the CEO of Bank of America.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Brian Moynihan is flying Black Lives Matter flags on his lawn? No, he's not.
No.
But you would think that, listening to how Bank of America puts out statements after George Floyd and stuff. This is my whole thing, man.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be about it, and don't do it from this bullshit, like, to use your words, coddling, crappy, whatever. Do it from let's talk about this. Do it like this.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to put on headphones and have a goddamn podcast about it, but as a company, like, sit in the kitchen, talk with somebody about it, you know, and let it be natural. Unfortunately, in corporate America, they don't let anything be natural. It all has to be like a system, someone reports to somebody, so they're going to report to them on this. And that's what I mean. It's another example of how ass backwards it gets. Mm-hmm. It's like we create all these systems that end up being like racist in and of themselves because they're set up to be anti-racist, but in reality, you talk about like someone recognizing you by the color of their skin. Like, no, you have a lived experience as a black man. Okay, I can get with that. I understand what you're saying. When people take that a step farther, like, no, I need to lead with that. In fact, the intonation can be, I wouldn't belong interviewing for X job if I wasn't black. That's bullshit to me.
Yeah.
Like, pick the best people, and that can be an uncharacteristic or not uncharacteristic, unpopular opinion to some people. But it's like I feel like we are at a point where, even if there's progress that has to be made, if you're talking about like females or minorities in the workplace and stuff, we are much farther along now. And there are a lot of phenomenal candidates who should not be defined as potential candidates because they're X race or X gender. I find that to be an effrontery to those people. And I'm not one, in that case, I'm not a woman. I'm not a black guy. I'm not a Latino. I can't say like, I understand that from my end, but like when I'm looking at it as a white dude, I'm like, wait, that guy... Why are they saying he got the job because of that? No, he got the job because he's fucking good at the job.
Yeah.
And then it works the other way sometimes too. Someone gets the job, they're fucking terrible. And it's like, what happens? People get pissed about that on the side. I always stayed the fuck out of those things. It made me uncomfortable. But like people be like, oh, diversity hire. Yep. Like they say that, and they're not trying to be racist, right? But it's prejudice at best, and it's like that just causes more problems. And I feel like maybe 30, 40 years ago, that was probably really, really, really important to be over the top on that. Now it's like, all right, we need to, in my opinion, we need to identify where we are and figure out how we're going to do that naturally and not think like, oh, I have a black guy coming in to interview. Oh, he must be the one. That is taking away that person's abilities, in my opinion.
For sure. And I think there's also a balance to that because... to your point, you want to hire the best person for the job, right? If historically, a subject that we've talked about before, coaches. If historically you have coaches of a minority group who don't get the job because of the past racial circumstances.
In like the NFL, NBA.
Let's talk about NFL, okay. Sure.
Yeah.
If you have a system that didn't have black coaches in the past, and you want to hire the best guy for the job now, if you want to jump from 0 to 100 and you want to go look at coaches' experience, you can't hire black coaches if they weren't allowed to have the job in the first place. So I feel like there needs to be a balance of like, yes, choose the right man for the job, but don't assume that the white person is always the best candidate because they were a coach for the 20 years when only 10 years the black coach was able to even get the gig.
Yes.
So I'm saying like there should be it gets into the weeds after a certain point. So I feel like there shouldn't be a quota, but I feel like you also have to acknowledge just systematically certain people are going to look better on paper because of the previous system that was in place.
Sure.
So like I also like that. So that was on the coaches. We can go into coaches more too, but like even.
And you're talking about the Rooney Rule specifically there in the NFL.
Yeah.
And
I think we both agreed that now it needs to be.
Well, let's give the context there for people that don't know what we're talking about. So, Rooney Rule invented by Art Rooney. I forget if it was the second or the first, whatever. It was the Steelers owner. I think it was in maybe the early 90s, something like that. Had phenomenal intentions behind it. And by the way, the Steelers have always backed that up as an organization.
Yep.
To say nothing of the fact, and because he's great, by the way. But Mike Tomlin, African-American head coach.
One of the greatest will go down. Yep.
They've had him for 14, 15 years. This is a franchise, and they've done that with all their coaches. They like finding a great coach and having stability. And once they had a black guy in there, they did not treat him any differently, nor should they.
Yep.
So they've backed this up the whole way. When they started that rule, the rule was for every head coach opening, and eventually it was all coaches, maybe, I'm not sure, where you had to interview at least one minority hire. Mm-hmm. And I talked about this with Nick Garol, where it creates really fucking awkward situations where it actually has the opposite effect. Mm-hmm. There was actually a news story like a month ago that came out about this that wasn't around when Nick and I were talking, but there was an Asian offensive...
I saw this.
You saw this?
I saw this. He wasn't the right type of minority for the job.
He was told that. I believe him, too. Yeah. I don't think he's lying about that. Yeah. He was interviewing for some offensive line coach job in the NFL and was literally told by, a team president or something, you're not the right type of minority we're looking for.
Which is bullshit, yeah.
Which is bullshit. And I'll tell you how I think that went. I think whoever that person is, chances are they're just a moron. And they weren't thinking at all. And so in their head, they're like, they're interviewing this guy over the phone and they're writing all this shit down. And they're like, had a brain fart moment. And they're like, you're not, we're trying to hire some minorities here. You're not the one we're looking for. And they're not realizing or not thinking about how fucking patronizing that is and how that comes across. So I'm glad he brought that to the surface because it's an issue and it builds my case a little bit. You have teams who are trying to check a box. Mm-hmm. And they're feeling like they're forced to check a box. Mm-hmm. One of the prime examples you'll ever see, but it happens with a lot of head coach openings, was the Oakland Raiders with John Gruden.
Yep.
Oakland had wanted to rehire John Gruden for almost 2 decades. Okay? They had wanted to get John Gruden out of the booth, or out of Tampa at first, and then he got fired from Tampa and went to the booth to come back and coach Oakland. Okay? That was a goal. John Gruden suddenly became an open possibility. They literally fired their current head coach, who they might have been firing anyway, Jack Del Rio, because he wasn't doing a great job, to go hire John Gruden. Mm-hmm. John Gruden is white. So you know what they had to do? They had to call up everyone and their mother knew that Mark Davis, had everyone in the NFL, fans, everyone knew that Mark Davis, the Raiders owner, had been trying to get John Gruden back forever. Mm-hmm. They knew he was going to hire him because now Gruden was finally saying behind the scenes, yeah, I'm ready to go coach again. They knew that they were going to pay him a ridiculous contract, and they knew he was going to be the head coach. But because of the Rooney Rule, they had to call up, I don't know who they did, whether it was an outside candidate or more likely somebody in the building already, and say, hey, so-and-so, let's say John, and John's a black guy. You know and I know we're going to be hiring Gruden. We need you to do us a favor, though. Can you come in and interview for the job so we can satisfy the Rooney Rule? Do you know what a horrible spot that is to be in for both parties? He's going in there for a fake interview. He knows it, and they know it.
For that circumstance, yes.
Yeah.
Because normally in an interview process, the hiring crew doesn't know who they want right now. You're looking, you're a blank slate.
Yes, that's fair.
So in that standpoint, I can see what you mean by they already knew who they wanted. This is now something that we have to do.
But then let's take it to that example.
Where it's a blank slate.
It's a blank slate. And a lot of teams, they zone in on like 5 candidates.
Sure.
And they're not thinking about the color of their skin. They just zone in on these 5 guys. And then they realize as they get down to 3, oh my God, we need a black guy. We don't have one. That is, do you hear how stupid that sounds coming out of my mouth?
Well, the one thing I don't like, the Rooney Rule is like, I don't see anything wrong with saying that you should interview them. I will have a problem with it just saying like, oh, you have to hire a black guy because that's, you throw everything out the window.
Yeah.
But I think, because sometimes, there's subconscious prejudice too.
Sure.
That not every, hiring manager has, a subconscious bias like training and like hiring. That's actually a big training thing now that, companies do.
Agreed.
Subconscious, bias, social bias. And sometimes you don't even know that you're doing it. And that doesn't always just be race, whether it's men, women, old age can be something that you discriminate someone against on. Disabilities, like there's so many different things. Sexual orientation, it goes deeper than just race. So it's like, I feel like having something that kind of just, hey, maybe you don't know you're doing this, but a lot of the people that you're looking at to hire are only of this construct. And like, let's say, this was a big thing that I was talking about in like college applications. Let's say race wasn't on the application.
Okay.
Just years of experience and the teams that they worked with. If you just looked at that, at that point, what do you think a majority of the people that will be bringing in is?
Fair point.
From a system that was historically, if you want to based off experience, there weren't a lot of black coaches. So I'm just saying, if you want to go on, I want coaches with the most, top 5 coaches with the most experience on my table, because I want someone who's experienced. I feel like that kind of already neglects a lot of black coaches. Just by the sheer number.
I think you're getting me on the island I want to be on for this one, which is, and this is a psychological thing. You can look at this with, forget race, forget a political issue, everything in humanity. It's a part of like our flaw in groups. When we go to correct a situation, we don't correct it to where it needs to go. We correct it past the point where it needs to go. And we create a new wrong, and then it resets the other way. And it's a constant pendulum. It's the whole law. I talk about it all the time. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. And so I think what happens is that I wouldn't even say right away the actions are always equal but opposite. They're at least something that gets the ball rolling, and then it doesn't stop. And then it stops, like people get so invested in wanting to keep that ball rolling that they don't look at the cars that they're rolling over and totaling along the road here. And it's like, I try to point that stuff out. And what I don't do, and I'm very careful not to do, especially with something like this, is then say that, that whole system was fucked. Because and I know, and people who can look at things rationally understand, these things more often than not, far more often than not, were created because something was wrong. It couldn't stay the same. So I dream of a world where we could get it back to the middle ground, but I also live in a world where we have 2 parties that run things really across like most of the countries. There's 2 core sets of beliefs, liberal, conservative. It just varies differently across a lot of the important ones, and yet they maintain that. They continue dividing us in 2 teams, and then they do it on every issue that has nothing to do with politics. It's like your team this or team that.
And we need to unroot that and scrap it and get rid of it. We talk about this all the time, but John Adams back then said 2-party system is the worst system you can have. Said that back then, and look what we're stuck with now. I know we're shifting a little bit into politics, but
let's do it. Let's roll it.
But just from the Rooney Rule, I kind of mentioned like college applications. I would love to get your input on this.
Okay.
Because there's been a few stories.
Pull that in a little bit. Sorry.
There's been a few stories out. The Harvard lawsuit against Asian community, Asian applicants.
I heard about Harvard. That. Can you explain that though more?
So basically, a lot of people from the Asian, and sorry for the broad Asian. I know Asian is a very broad statement, but for lack of more specifics, they did a lawsuit against schools like Harvard. Saying that they have a skewed application process because they were not getting accepted when they had technically the better numbers.
And the connotation was that Harvard thought, I'm assuming here, correct me if I'm wrong, was that Harvard thought we have too many Asians, so we need to get rid of some. Is that what they're getting at?
That's what they were getting at.
Okay.
And I'll say this. If the college application was completely merit-based, completely SAT score, completely GPA, in your opinion, do you think there will be a very monolithic look and feel to that university?
Yes, and you were asking this in another way a few minutes ago, I think, but completely. I think that, I joke about being a white kid from Jersey trying to apply to whatever fucking school, and it's like, well, immediately, if it's a good school on the East Coast, it's like you have points against you, and it's like, there's a level of, that's just how it works, like a little complaint in it, but it's true in the sense that it's also set up that way because there is a higher supply of people like me, period. Yep. And so I'm okay with the fact that there needs to be a skew to the system in that. I don't even like calling it a skew, but there needs to be a focus in the system to be able to say, okay, if there's similar applications between this type of person and this type of person, some of these cases, we need to make sure we're taking the other type of person. I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. It's another example, though, of does it go way too far? Yeah, it probably does. It probably goes way over the top because what do schools compete on? All these colleges and these administrations, they compete on their numbers.
Yep.
They go to these conferences. They get in these societies that judge and give awards based on blank, blank, blank. It's all comes back to money, right? Mm-hmm. They want to make more money. They want their employees to make more money. The people want to rise up through the ranks. And so they say, oh, look at us. We have X percent of our classes of a blank background or whatever.
Oh, they market that
hard
to this day.
Yeah, they do.
They market that hard. And what I'm getting at, I just want to just make it clear, is that I think you need a holistic approach to an application. And I think that's what, if a school's doing it right, they're looking at the whole entire application and the whole entire spectrum of an applicant rather than just the merit, which is what they should do. Because, you did a great segment on colleges and universities, the price of them, and how outrageous there are.
But at the beginning of the podcast.
At the beginning of your journey. And it's schools, and unfortunately, I don't want to say it like this, but your Yales, your Harvards, your Stanfords, all those high brand name, which they are. They're like the Nikes, they're the Jordans of schools.
Yes.
Kids feel like they need to be there to be successful and to live a fulfilled life for the rest of their lives. They're the top of the list for the number of applications that they get every single year. Doesn't need to be that way. But we still have a culture where we push these brand name schools, which we shouldn't. But where I'm getting at is,
why shouldn't we? Are they not? And I ask that because, and I want to agree with what you're saying, but sure, there's a lot of devil's advocate in me in this, looking at it like great, somewhat cynically.
Which is great.
Because I don't like how big those brands got, but I also can't deny the results in a numerical fashion of places like that. Like if you go to Stanford, you are far more likely to be high up in the tech world doing very fucking well 20 years later, opposed to college X.
Now, do you think, I think it's going to be a percentage thing. Do you think that's mostly because of the education that they're receiving at that university, or is it because their alumni network that they have access to when they graduate?
That's a great question.
And I feel like it's more of the alumni network that they have access to when they get. Yes, it all started academically somewhere. They had to. You had to, whether you graduated or not from that university, you needed to do well at your job to go up to the ranks. But I think after a while, especially now, like even with a lot of entry-level jobs these days, you don't need a college education to be successful. Like, you don't absolutely need it.
Correct.
But a lot of those big name brand schools, I feel like their alumni network is just fully loaded with top execs, where like top execs as in they see your alma mater, hire them.
Boom.
And they can do that. And that's where I feel like majority of their power nowadays has when it comes to their career services and how well paid there are when they graduate from those universities.
There is definitely a huge tribal aspect to it. And I think there's even one at Stanford. I think Stanford is a little bit of a bad example if we were going to go there, because there is it's such an interesting place with where it's located and what it's birthed. And there's certainly an aspect of it that has to do with, oh, he's a Stanford man, you know. But I see a lot of that in Ivy League, especially.
Yeah.
That's where the example gets really interesting. And there's a lot of amazing schools, obviously, in there. And what it doesn't mean, though, is that the people coming from there are dumb, though some of them are. However, most of them are not intellectually, in my opinion. They're all pretty fucking smart as far as like IQ goes across society. So there's a level to which it would seem like that is still natural because it's the best helping the best go be the best and build the next generations, which is a level of competition that we want in society. Where you're going with it, though, is where it goes out of control and it becomes a total he said to her and she got me this thing type society where it's all about who you know. And I agree. That gets a little bit, that gets shady. Even at our school, I've kind of avoided that. I don't reach out to people I don't know that went there. And maybe that's dumb. And maybe I'll look to do it at some point if it can help me out. You know, I don't want to shy away from that. The school offers that. I really appreciate it. I think that's a huge thing that you have to encourage in a way, because how do you define success of a college? The success of the people who leave there.
Yeah.
So you got to help that out the best you can. But I understand what you're saying in that it creates a system where, is it really all on merit? I don't know. The beautiful part of that, though, in today's society is that there is such an opportunity for the upstart in a way that there never has been. You know, it used to be you still had to have this on your resume, whatever. I mean, even fucking Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard, right? Like he was there. And Zuckerberg recently was there. We're now in this interconnected generation where people can say, fuck you, and go do stuff. And I have friends who do that. I mean, you know of Anthony and Riley, like they're college dropouts, and they didn't go to like really fancy colleges. They're both smart as fuck. And yet they're able to do what they do. And trust me, when they're going to these VCs and stuff, those people aren't saying, where'd you go to college again? What class did you take? Oh, you dropped out. No, that's more of a reason for them to be like, oh, these guys get it. They're rolling. You know what I mean? So, and some of those people who work at those places could be Penn people, could be Harvard people. Many of them are, right? And there's still somewhat of an appreciation for that in today's society. So I feel like we're moving there. But your point of that tribal continuity that then leaves, you know, the insiders away from the outsiders, it does still exist. And it is something that has definitely benefited some people to the point where, you know, there's like this expectation that people, this entitlement that people have. I mean, do you see this? Like where people go to a college and they say, that means that I am meant to do this.
For sure. And I also want to say, like, there's a reason why Harvard was the one that had the lawsuit. Like, because it's Harvard. It has the name. They're not attacking Community College of New Jersey, or like, you know, they're not. And
you're talking about this Asian students suing Harvard.
Like suing. I'm saying like the reason they're not suing colleges like your average Joe college. They're suing like the elite ones because of the promise that they get when they graduate from those schools. That's like my point. But also too, I just feel like applications cannot just be full on merit based. You need to look at a holistic approach of who someone is. Because even from that standpoint, in a utopian world, we all grew up in the same level playing field, and we all had the same chance of getting the same grades, and all went to the same schools that received the same education, and we all had the same exact chance to get into a school like Harvard. That is not the case.
100%.
That is just not, hands down, not the case. The fact that I grew up in the South Bronx and you grew up, you know, Pacific Town in New Jersey,
West Deptford and Mulligan Hill.
West Deptford, Macaulay Hill. By where we were born alone, we were already going to receive different educations.
Yes.
Just based off that.
Yes.
So if I wanted the same chance as you to get into the school, I feel like race shouldn't be a reason, but it should be a factor.
Yes, I agree with that.
It should be a factor.
Yes.
Something to be considered. Because I also feel like you don't want to also mismatch the school with someone's actual ability. Like you don't want to set someone else, so you don't want to set someone up for failure.
Well, that's even another point.
Yeah,
I wasn't even going to go there, but yes.
But like,
yes, that's
so
fair.
I'm saying, like,
yes.
Just like my point of the Rooney Rule, like I have nothing wrong with you just simply interviewing them. Yes, get them in the door. That's something that you can't see on paper of the 20 years that they had of coaching experience. Yes, get them in the door. But you need to acknowledge that, hey, this education that he received is different from this applicant. Maybe this person could afford more SAT prep than this kid. Like, there's just systematic factors, and it goes a lot. And I know there's a lot of heat right now about, like, you know, you can't fix racism with racism, and you can't, if you look at someone's race as a factor, then it's trying to fix racism with racism. And it's like, I see what you mean, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge that it's not a level playing field, and these are things that should be looked at. And also too, like, I gave the scenario before, like, imagine a scenario where you didn't have race on the application at all. You didn't have hometown or anything on the application at all. It was just purely merit based. You admitted you're going to have a skewed look to how that school looks. Let's take race out of it. Maybe you might have majority men than women. Maybe you might have majority just pure academics, and you might have no football players. Like, it will be consider them being an athlete. Like, this, you want, as a student body. If I was ever leaving school, I would want a holistic student body.
It would be survival of the fittest to an extent where it's a bell you can't unring.
Yeah, because some people have the weapons to put up the fight, and some people don't.
When people think that they can solve a problem in one generation or within a small window, they are ignoring the fact that cycles exist, and cycles that are started with generations above and below, or continued below each other, right? I want to come back to this real fast. I just want to give context to that Harvard case you and I were talking about, which is the Students for Fair Admission versus President of Fellows of Harvard College. It's a lawsuit. This is on Wikipedia, people. Yep. It's a lawsuit concerning affirmative action in student admissions. The organization Students for Fair Admissions and other plaintiffs filed a lawsuit against Harvard in 2014 in the U.S. District Court of the District of Massachusetts, claiming that the college discriminates against Asian American applicants in its undergraduate admissions process. So this later went to the Supreme Court, and it's I believe it's been tossed at this point. It was rejected by the Supreme Court and everything. But it's interesting how a quote-unquote minority has now gone all the way to the other side because they happen to be a minority that, due to environment and statistics and whatever, they had a higher admission ratio, and so there was too many of them in that quote, which is like a crazy concept to me. I hate when you're like, there's too many or too, you know what I mean? It's like, but it's something you pay attention to.
Yeah.
So you don't create that monolith like you're talking about. Your point, though, on environment is the core of the issue, because you can't, like, if we went to a system where we said, okay, now we're going to computerize it. We don't know anyone's race, age, where they're from, whatever. And we're just going to go based on common statistics of grades, extracurricular activities, whatever. That monolith you could create would be that social Darwinism I was referring to on steroids, because all the places and people of all different races and communities and backgrounds who have been left behind because of their environment that they were born into would immediately be cast off the island. And so their offspring would be born on the same island, and it would be a bell that can't be unrung because every generation would continue to be up at the top. It is a parallel example on a less extreme scenario to, like, the South post-world or post-Civil War, where they set up all these systems where the newly freed slaves were basically fucked, right? Like, if they didn't go to the North, down South, they basically, like, almost legalized some forms of slavery and whatever, and they set it up so that their kids were fucked, and their kids were fucked, and their kids were fucked, and it created a system. No different here. It just gets so interesting to me when you start to then have it swing the other way, where in this case, like, Asian Americans, who are a quote-unquote minority group, are complaining about it. And I even think about it, though, from that context of environment, because I was reading a Malcolm Gladwell book. I want to say, I don't think it was Talking to Strangers. I forget which one it is. They all kind of blend together for me. But
great read, by the way.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. I love him. But he talked about how the stereotype of Asians being better at math is true, But it's not true because Asians are just great at math. Do you know why it's true? It's true because their number system is much, much better than ours. Their number system simply adds, I think it's like, I'm going to explain this wrong, but it adds syllables as it goes up. Whereas in English, we go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to like 11, 12 new words.
Yep.
And then 20 blank, 30 blank. And then it's like, okay, you got that down, but now you have to introduce an entire new one. 100, 1,000, million. It's a lot to memorize. So when you're a 4-year-old learning to count, there are far more hurdles to being able to count high that you have to go through. Whereas in like Chinese, for example, the difference between saying the number 1 and saying like 10 million is not much. So these kids can count a lot higher earlier. So it's like when you get ahead in a race, you're drafting, right? It's harder for someone to catch up. It's not like you have the same distance. It's like you went up that hill, they still got to go up and you're on the downhill, right? So the same thing applies here to me in that case, that has to do with environment, and it's a positive environment. It makes them great at math or whatever. And so then they get, they're actually an advantage so much that they then have to sue because they feel like they're getting turned away when they shouldn't. For positives. Whereas you can look at other communities across all races who live in poor environments or whatever. And so they don't get access to the same schooling like you talked about. They don't get access to the same household, like parents who know a certain amount. They don't know a lot of important people. They don't have people to know. So they don't get in somewhere because of that. And so you have to have a system that at least levels the playing field a little bit to give those people the opportunity to start the race of life, which starts once you are independent, quote unquote, out of the house, let's say at college, which is how we still define it. There's a whole lot of issues there, but getting out of the house, like let's level the playing field there. And let's give it so that Johnny, who's a trust fund baby, has a similar opportunity based on a level of merits as, Jim, who's not a trust fund baby and lives in project housing or something.
Yep. Exactly. And I think we can both agree that the education that one is receiving in those younger years are way more important to how their life is going to be, the trajectory of their life, than their 4 years at college.
Oh, yeah.
Way more important. But there's such a discrepancy on what students, even just within this country alone, are receiving based off of their area code.
Oh, yeah, dude. It's such a problem.
Exactly. So yeah, that was my point there, and from application wise, coaches wise, I just feel like for right now, I think it's okay that race is a factor. Don't make it a selling point. Don't make it a hiring point, but it should be a factor.
I've never heard someone put it that way and using that word, and usually I don't like putting a one word on stuff, though I do it myself. We all do it. I actually do like that, because it gets across exactly what it should be. It's a factor. It's not the definition of who the person is.
Exactly.
That would be a better society for me, because it doesn't, it's almost like...
And sorry, just to add...
No, go ahead.
Like, when I say race shouldn't be the only factor, obviously, economic background, gender, sexual orientation, like all of those should also be factors. You want a holistic applicant pool, extracurricular activities, all should be factors. But I think when you want to make a full, truly diverse student body, all should be considered.
Yeah, and like...
And it shouldn't be, I feel like it shouldn't be taken as racist when you're not...
When you're not what?
Like, when you're not necessarily the one that's selected because of the fact...
Yes, that's important.
If they decide not to accept you based surely on just your race... Hopefully that's not the case, but it's like...
And this is another problem you're highlighting now. People will use, like, I pay attention to that intersectionality curve a lot. It's used to define our society. And if people haven't checked that out, it's basically where the top of the intersectionality curve, like the top of the top, is like a white cisgender male, I think is how they define it.
Yep.
I don't know why the computer is giving us backlash on that. It's probably just because I have the thing in our earphones, but ignore that.
No,
people can't hear that.
I'm listening.
I don't think the listeners can hear that. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So, they're at the top. So, like, I'm at the top in that way. The bottom would be, like, I don't know, a transgender black female from, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm going to paint every single possible, like, thing that could be discriminated against beyond it. The lower we go on that curve with everything, the more we seek as a society to have to protect. And this is getting into interesting territory, but you're a great person to talk about this with because we've had conversations similar to this. I don't know if I've gone directly at it, but we start to treat people on their identity, kind of like I was talking about with you earlier today. I don't know if that was on the podcast or before, but we start to then define them that way such that we ignore things on the way down. A common example of where this will happen is you will see that women who are protected, right, on this curve because they're below men and they're trying to fight back and you know what I mean when I say like trying to fight back.
Yes.
But, you have like the feminist movement, which has been around forever in the sense that had to secure them the right to vote, had to secure basic things, right? And then some of them go too far, in my opinion, where they want like, the women fucking whipping the men, and that's like kind of weird to me. But when you look at some of even like the hardcore feminists who have been now put up for like cancellation, it's because they start to see that the same curve that protects them suddenly then doesn't protect them as a woman on something.
Yep.
So the most stereotypical example that every single person talks about now, I talk about it, like you look at any popular show, they talk about it. And I think really the first guy to bring it mainstream as far as like discussing it all the time was Joe Rogan. The example is the transgender male to female competing in female sports.
Yes.
We are still not at a point, though I think we will be. I really trust the continued innovation of science. We are still not at a point where when a male goes through a full transition to female through all surgical procedures, everything, we are still not at a point where completely chemically the male genes that can make males biologically stronger than women, which we are, is completely gone. So they have an advantage. And they have some, like it goes down to bone density and everything that can't be changed right now by science.
Yep.
One day it can be, and it won't matter. And we won't have to have this argument. But right now, this is the factor, and these are the facts. And you will see some of the same people who support women and are all about women's rights, which is great, then be like, if you dare question that, be like, you're a hater, including when feminists, women, question it and say, that's bullshit. We don't want that. We don't want, like, I think the thing that started the whole thing with Rogan was there was a UFC fighter, Fallon Fox, I think it was.
Okay.
I might have that wrong, but I believe that's who it was, who was born a male. Actually, I believe had a kid with a woman, lived as a male. And, like, she then became a she, and she was stronger than the other women. Like, she wasn't that great of a fighter. She was just beating people with brute force. She finally got stopped because I think she got beat by a woman who was just a great fucking fighter. But, like, Joe Rogan was watching this going, what the fuck? I'm watching maybe not a full man, but a partial man fight another woman. It's hard enough watching a man fight a man and a woman watching a woman. This is a brutal sport, but now that's a fucking crime. And so we see then people say, you can't say that. And this is where it goes too far. And it's like, well, now we want to pull back. And if I say, or if Joe Rogan says, or if you say, well, let's pull back on that. Oh, now we're a psycho-conservative who is hateful of other people who have a different lived experience.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we can all agree that cancel culture it's
insane.
It's terrible, and that's what we have, especially. You talked about it well with a number of your guests, but echo chambers, especially on social media, and how the wrong narrative can easily be passed by a single post. Yeah, that's a difficult subject. I think when I think about the transgender community, my number one thought is, how many of those scenarios are out there that we are like debating their physical ability within another sport? I think when I think about the transgender community, I'm thinking about more so like getting them the right healthcare. Like right now, acknowledging them for he, she, they, like pronouns. I think we should get a foundation on that within our everyday society, and then with these other issues, discuss it more. I don't have an answer for you when it comes to like the athletes and this, where should they focus? Because also too, it's like, all right, equal playing ground. It's like whether if a man's in the military and a woman's in the military, the standard for number of push-ups they can do are different. From that biological standpoint. But if their intent is to perform the same duty, shouldn't it be the same? And it's like that gets into like it's weedy territory.
That's a good one, by the way. I hate what this does to all of us.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
To people like me too, because you know what it turns into in your head. Like when I'm thinking of the athlete example, you start thinking about like body composition. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's such a stupid thing to have to think about, because then you start defining people, and it's like we're going to physically then define people. Because I'll even say, if some guy who's like 6'4" with a voice down here, who wears a wig, identifies as a woman, and is therefore going to take a shit in women's restrooms, I think that's crazy. But then do I think it's crazy if someone who's had a full sex change and clearly identifies as a woman does the same thing? No, I don't. Mm-hmm. That's what they should do.
Yeah.
And that makes me unpopular with everyone, because you have to be one side or the other, where it's a generalization. Everyone's the same. Mm-hmm. But it makes it hard, because it's like, well, where do you draw the line? Mm-hmm. Do you draw the line if they just have a dick left but nothing else? Like, I'm getting graphic, but like this is the point. You see how crazy this sounds to talk?
Yeah.
It's a very difficult topic, and this is just one of many. But, you're looking at it where you're saying you want to define other stuff, and like, let's talk about the pronoun thing.
Yeah.
So, first of all, can you give your full opinion on that, so I have context, like what you think about and how it works too? Like, can it be anyone who says like if I walked up to you and said, I want you to start calling me she, do you think that is acceptable, or should it be someone who legitimately has a lived experience in that way?
And I'm still learning about the transgender community and how that works, and I think society as a whole is still learning about it. I mean, we're only talking about it as of late. And, the human in me would, say, okay, fine. Like, be who you're comfortable, like, tell me who you are and go from there. I can't, what's the woman's name? Because I don't mean to always take us back to race, but the woman it was like a white woman who identified as a black woman.
Rachel Dolezal.
Yes, her. I think back to that.
I was just on her Instagram yesterday, I swear to God.
And
took a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, there's just certain things, and obviously that becomes a little bit more personal because I'm black. Mm-hmm. So it's like, who are you to say you have this black experience when clearly, but also it's like, who am I to speak to? It gets really touchy, because then I shouldn't say, like, let's say you came to me and said, hey, like, I identify as her, she. Who am I to tell you, no, you're not? If, like, that's how you, I don't know how you feel until I don't know your personal, like, it's hard. It's tough, because I'm looking at you externally and saying no.
Sure.
Because you have that between your legs.
Sure.
And you appear like this, and that cannot happen.
And this is where this is where I get unpopular again.
Yep.
Because
I'm probably
because I look at this far too simply, I think. But I think it's also, I mean, of course, when you have an opinion, you think you're right. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't know.
If someone wants to put pronouns in their bio, do it. Mm-hmm. If someone wants to say to me, if I call them a he or a she, and they want to be called something else, and they tell me that, I want them to tell me that.
Yeah.
I may think it's fucking crazy and stupid. I might have that opinion.
But you will respect it.
I will probably respect it.
Yep.
Unless they're a dick, right? Like, unless they're doing it for attention, like to be a dick.
Yeah.
In which case, I may be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
All other things being equal, how many of those situations would then apply to the law? And this is actually that guy Jordan Peterson, when he blew up. This is what he blew up about. And I'm 100% on his side for the actual stance he took. Mm-hmm. What happened was in Canada, and I'm going to get some of the details not completely correct, so I'll keep it broad.
For sure.
They were introducing legislation that was going to legally force you to say the words, to say pronouns of other individuals when they tell you to. meaning it would be a crime to say otherwise. Jordan Peterson came out and said, this is it. This is where tyranny starts, when they start attacking words, because he, like me, like a lot of people, understands that things are a slippery slope. And we are forced every day sometimes to go down some. It is part of life, like you can't avoid it. But there are certain things when it comes to like words and government and action on it, you know where that one's going and you know not to go down this. So everyone painted him as an anti-trans activist and whatever. And I won't sit here and say he was probably like a fan, but like if you listen to him talk, he even answered the questions himself. Like they asked him at the beginning on like a famous news like roundtable that he was invited to be on with some activists against him, where the newscaster said to him, Professor Peterson, if you were asked by so-and-so, a trans individual, to call her she, what would you call her? And he looked right back at him and said, she. And everyone, they were all like, wait, really? I thought you were saying no. And he's like, no, you're not fucking listening to me.
No.
I'm a human being. If another human being says I prefer to be called something after, or they correct me on it, all right, I'll respect it.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't have the government tell me to do it. Don't have the government tell me they can put me in jail if I do otherwise. And it goes to every word. It's the same reason why, like, I advocate for all speech. I want the craziest organizations out there speaking because I think their ideas are terrible and I think society can shut them down. I think at this point, if the majority of society can't I use this extreme all the time, can't shut down the opinion of the KKK, we got a fucking problem.
But there was a time in this country where we were not shutting it down.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Absolutely. But we did. Eventually.
Yes.
And there was a lot of damage to go there. It was a horrible organization that still does exist. But like today, in our society, I want the KKK where I can fucking see them with their horrible ideas. I want them to put their cute little fucking outfits on and march so that we can laugh at them and beat their arguments without even having to argue because they're stupid arguments. You know? Where people then say to me, reasonable people will say, well, no, I'd want to shut down their speech. The person inside me wants to do that too. I just know.
It's because but when you go as specific as the KKK, they also promote violence.
Oh, fuck
I feel
yes.
that there's a line.
Let me be clear. When I say speech, the instant, Steve Bannon's a great example, the former Trump advisor who's not in the KKK. But he specifically, I won't repeat what he said, talked about murder of public officials and physically like what we should do to them. He was banned off Twitter and YouTube. He should have been. I fully support it.
Yes.
That's not free speech.
Yes.
That's violence.
Exactly.
So by the way, if you just did it that way, the KKK would probably ban themselves pretty quick, which is another benefit of that. With the pronouns, which is I want to be clear, that is, I just brought up the most extreme. I like to do that just to like paint the picture. With the pronouns, we're not talking about violence. We're not talking about that. And people will try to then say, oh, there's some trans hate and stuff. There is. And there are hate crimes that happen.
There is.
I'm saying on a societal whole, there is not violence promoted by an organization that's anti-pronouns. That's not it. It's like if you are just somebody that says, hey, I don't want the government to say that I have to do this. As an example, I don't want people to mandate that I have to put he, him in my social bios. I identify as a male. If someone called me a she, I'd probably be a little taken aback, maybe a little offended. Life would go on. I'd tell them I'm a he, right? Like I don't need to say I'm a he, him. If someone wants to do that, though, if you want to do that, free country, man, do it. Yeah. No problem. Just because I wouldn't do it doesn't mean that it's the same effect. If I were then saying you're not allowed to do it, I'm doing the same thing from the opposite angle that I'm saying you shouldn't be allowed to do. You know, and luckily in our country we haven't introduced any legislation like that. But that's why I bring up the pronouns, because it's like people are making this like, oh, you have to do it, and they're putting it in the fucking corporate workplaces, which is hilarious because they're run by Brian Moynahans of the world who don't give one fuck about it.
Exactly.
It's hypocritical.
And I feel like once you go there, I feel like you would have to identify everything else about you. Joshua Ilutiza, black, male, like you, like
I'm
on
nodding.
everything, yes. Like that's not even on my identification. I have eye color, I have height, I have weight. Doesn't say African American.
Yeah.
On it.
And when people, by the way, point to this and make, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene was making some the crazy house lady. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
She was making some far examples to like the Holocaust with like COVID and shit like that. And I'm like, listen, lady. I mean, she's a kook bag, so I already am not really paying attention. But when she was getting all the shit for that, I'm just like, you got to be smarter than that. Mm-hmm. I don't give a fuck like how stupid you are. You got to be smarter than that, because that's what we do. We take things out of context. And like we could take something like pronouns and go Nazi Germany. What it doesn't mean is that there aren't a bunch of very small little things that can lead to something like that you can point out and say, hey, this is, the top of the dam of that slippery slope. This is the top of the dam shit. I do agree with that. Mm-hmm. Besides, I'm off her example. I'm on pronouns right now. But like we take it too far, and then we start to legislate from the other end and say, no, you're not even allowed to say them. Well, if you tell people they're not allowed to do something, they're probably going to fucking do it.
Yeah. And there's also, I'm going to hit this point, I think there's levels to advocacy. I feel like for what transgender LGBTQ community are fighting for, I feel like there's a lot more things they deserve a right to than just he, she, him, they. Like that on their profile will have very little effect. Like, not sorry, very little effect, but like I'm pretty sure getting access to healthcare is way more important than whether or not they get to put she, him, they on an application. Agreed. Let's get them those basic rights. Let's learn more about it. That's why I went back to like my point before. I was like, I just feel like there's certain things we should agree on and get a level playing field on, and learn more about it, and then we can talk about those other things. But even like, and the reason why I say that is because even as a black man, like there's been a lot of performative acts of allyship. So okay, and this is okay. Let's knock down this racist statue that was there from 50 years ago because of what it represents. Sure, yes. I would much rather you change the systematic racism from redlining, from schools, financial situations, healthcare. I would love for you to fix those issues, prioritize those, than a statue that's standing up in the middle of a city square. I would rather you change the infrastructure of your school that's named Donald Trump or whatever. I would rather. I'm just thinking of a ridiculous name, but I feel like it's more important for me to fix the infrastructure of a school, to not have racist infrastructure in terms of your application process and whatnot, and giving access to a good education to all people, than the name of it as a whole.
Sure.
Like I feel like the change in name is the performance. Hey, we're changing because we are doing this.
You're saying you're an actions guy.
Do what's going to make the results. If you care about black people, you care about the welfare and the well-being of black people. They should have the same healthcare. They should have access to the same schools. Correct. And then this is not just race, again, for all marginalized communities. Give them what they need to survive and make the lives that you all preach, like, oh, we're all in this new world, we're in this better world, but they don't have the infrastructure to do so.
Correct.
And we keep preaching, pull yourself up by the boots, and you don't want to fix the roots of the system. But we perform. We're going to celebrate Juneteenth soon, and we're going to make it a federal holiday. And it's like, great. I'm pretty sure there's going to be more people who are happy to have a day off now of work than actually try to seek helping black businesses or learning about what the holiday actually means and doing stuff to better the black community. And I feel like am I saying the whole celebrating as a federal holiday as not a good thing? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying let's not celebrate if we're not going to do the work.
Well, it's the black square issue.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, yeah.
I got one on my profile.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have it on their profile.
Yep.
I talk about it on this show.
Yep.
I feel like I kind of back that up. And I also will fully admit, I didn't even give it a thought, which is like careless on my end. I talked about that with Terrence back in the day. It was like, all right, just quick, do it, whatever. What does that really do? What is it really? What are the people that put that up, myself included? What did we really accomplish doing that? Fucking nothing.
Yep.
We had a moment where we said, we see you. We fucking watched the game that night. Yep. It's just like that's what it is. For sure. Cynically, but it's true. It's what it is. So I agree with the actions format where it gets interesting from like a race level is where we also define that in society. There's things that are very clearly like racist, But in my opinion, that's a word, and there's plenty of examples of this, but that's a word we've murdered. We've killed it because people call everything that. They use it. They use it as a weapon. And I think the two parties use it as a huge weapon. I think it's
for sure.
I think it is the way they stay in power, which is something we should definitely talk about later, but I just don't want to lose this vibe you got on right now. And when I hear people state that word to anything, it immediately shuts down the connotation because it's one of the lowest things you can call someone in today's society. When you get called a racist, that's some heavy ass shit, man.
Or sexist.
Yeah. But I would say racist even more than, and that's no disrespect.
Given the recent events, I mean, it's not just recent events, but the media push of the recent events over the past year.
I guess, yeah, maybe
because it's more paid. Like as we all like,
maybe.
I mean, we had this conversation too. COVID and the pandemic gave people time to just take in all of this media push that they've been getting, and a lot of it is skewed, and it's just a lot. It's talked about a lot more now. Racism is not a new issue. Black Lives Matter is not like a new statement, or I mean, now it's an organization, but the statement itself isn't, something that's a new idea. It's always been there. It's just now we want to pay attention, and now we want to fix it, and now it's the hot story. It's the hot take.
Sure. I think though that where I want to tie it in beyond that though is the narratives that those powerful structures create. Democrats, Republicans, and the media behind them. Yep. Right? So they use it to divide us. And something I mean, this has come up on probably like 7 podcasts at this point because it's just an unbelievable theme, and I will continue to hit it.
And it's very important.
But Hotep Jesus said it the best on Twitter, and I won't get it fully right, but he's definitely not even the guy who came up with this. Like, some very fucking smart people came up with this years ago, and probably no one listened, and now guys like him are righteously so giving it a platform, and then guys like me see that, and I agree with him. I think he makes a great point, but he said the way he put it was, the top 1% of society maintains their power by convincing the bottom 99% of society that they are different in ways that they actually are not, to make them hate each other. And they do it in the most personal of things. They can't make it about, like, whether you live here or live there. They have to make it about, what's the color of your fucking skin? What gender are you? And they make all the issues about this. Look at all the politics we talk. It all comes back to those things, and we ignore the fact that this huge fucking wealth gap that all those people in both parties have been literally causing since the 1980s has continued to happen. It affects all communities too. And it just continues to affect the communities who are already fucked even more, right? So it really creates that horrible Darwinism technique to society and allows the people who are pulling the strings to just keep everyone down there on the strings. When I look at this, they now use the word racism as a weapon.
Hands down.
Right now, a year ago, I will never forget this, when the Brett Weinstein narrative started coming out, and then Rogan had him on. Brett Weinstein is a brilliant man. I've been a fan of his since like 2017. He's the guy he is like an old school liberal college professor who was at Evergreen State University. You heard about this one. Yeah.
Yes.
And he
chased
had
him off campus.
Yes. He had the audacity to say, hey, when you start, first of all, he's not like a regular full white guy. He's Jewish, right? So that was one thing. They were calling him white. There was a day where the Black Student Coalition was saying all white people, including administration, are not allowed on campus as like a day of remembrance. And he said, okay, I am all about all the movements for equality that I've supported my entire life and will continue to support. I know exclusion, though, when I see it, and this is the answer from the opposite side, and this is a problem. You are defining me by the color of my skin and not even recognizing that I am a minority myself, and you're telling me I can't come to fucking campus based on my identity. I know what this looks like. This is my hill. I will die on it. Yeah. And then he was attacked off campus by, admittedly, the craziest of the crazy. That's an extreme example, but it still happened. Yeah. But Brett Weinstein is a brilliant, like, man of science. And so when he went on Rogan with something he had been saying on his Dark Horse podcast, I believe last year, like last June, he came out and hedged it out front and said, listen, these are all theories based on evidence that I can ascertain, and I want people to do the work for themselves because we don't know any of this. But he's the one who really brought the lab leak hypothesis to the mainstream. Turns out now, all the places that ripped him, the New York Times, the Washington Post, he's looking like he was right. And now they're all on his side, and they're not even acknowledging it. And how did they rip him? How did they get rid of that opinion? How did they cancel that opinion? That then other people parroted because they're like, well, Brett said it, and his evidence was phenomenal. Let's look into this. They said, oh, that's racist. That's racism. A lab leak in Wuhan, China, that's racist against Asian people. And they put this tag on it, and so you don't want to be a fucking racist. You don't want to be, oh, I don't want to be associated with that.
Yep.
And now it's true. But they were able to change that narrative and not allow us to focus on that last year because why? Because that would have made Trump, who botched the response to this thing, it would have been something that would have been on his side because he would have been able to say, righteously so, look what China did. But if Trump says that, that's no good. So we'll call everyone a racist. That's fucking crazy. And to me, I don't care if I'm a white guy. I'm offended by that. Because I'm like, you are now defining us. You are trying to rip us all apart based on where we come from, right? The color of our skin or what we look like. And you're dragging it into science, which you claim to protect. That's where I draw the line and go, okay, now we're ruining this word and we are totally antithetical to what we're trying to do here, which is actually let facts and arguments win.
And I feel like also, too, pointing the finger and calling someone racist isn't a solution to the issue at hand either. You know, I feel like it goes back to my point where it's like, I'm going to change the name of the school, but I'm not going to change like what's actually happening in the infrastructure of the graduate rate, the education that these kids are getting. Like newspapers, Times, whatever, left, right, stop going for the headline and go for how do we get a solution out of this and how can we, create more discussions. I feel like you said, the word racist has been used as a weapon. Does not mean there aren't racist people out there.
Yes,
but
that's
it's
important.
definitely overused. Sexist, any ists, or but that's why conversations like these are more important now than ever.
Critical.
Like, because if we went with the status quo of social media, you're my enemy and I'm yours. You're holding me back from getting what I want, and I'm holding you back from getting what you want. And not only that, because the color of your skin, I assume that you're conservative and you have this belief, and
because I'm white,
you're a Karen. A word.
We're laughing, but it's true.
Yeah, no, it is true.
Good point.
And you look at me, especially like, let's say you didn't grow up in a scenario where you had access to, grow up around people of color or any other minority group. Your intake of what other minorities are like is from the information that you get on social media. And let's say I am from, predominantly Black and Hispanic community, but like I went away to, schools for high school and stuff like that. But if all of my, experience with people of, white Americans were just based off of what I get off television and what I'm seeing on the news, let's say strictly left news, my opinion on you is just going to be different just me by looking at you. And that's what they're creating. And our communities are already segregated as it is. So if we're pushing the same narrative to, if they believe that you're a predominantly Republican household, they're going to keep pushing, right views. And if you're a predominantly Democratic household, they're going to keep putting left views. And we're never going to see a common ground. Ever. Unless we meet face to face and we talk. Find those commonalities. And like, I think I said this to you before, I just feel like when it comes to like left, right, liberal, conservative, I feel like given a soulful, good-hearted person, we all want the same thing. Our ideas on how to get there is where we separate. And that's where we separate on taxes, more police, less police. I think that's where we get divided on like and it's hard. It's a hard thing to tell. Like you said, it's not going to be a single generational change either. But yeah, that's why I love that you're doing a podcast like this, man. It's really important.
Well, thank you, brother. That is exactly what we're trying to do here. We're just starting the conversations. We are trying to talk about things that, I want whoever's sitting across from me to bring up whatever it is, if it's touchy, we'll go at it. Yeah. And whether I have in someone who's black or someone who's white, even, with white guys, these race issues will come up because it is a social issue for everyone, right? And I like though that when I have you in here and you have that lived experience, we can talk about it, because there is I want to be careful how I say this to not discredit other conversations where it's not me and a black guy talking, but there is a level of legitimacy and credibility to it that you can't get in the other scenario there. But in your explanation you just gave, you talked about the solutions, and that's what I want to go to now, because I like that you recognize that. You said something along the lines of, and correct me if I'm wrong, these people in society, like all of us, when we're talking and fighting, we all think a lot of the same things. We just have different solutions to it. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. This is so fucking true and gets such little attention, and it blows my mind because it is plain for all of us to see, in my opinion. I think a lot of us just don't look. But it came up heavily in my podcast with Moose, Toby, which, we got into a whole lot of deep shit in that one. But
great episode.
Thank you. He's the man, dude.
Yeah,
he's awesome. But it came up how, that 99% and 1% point I was making about what Hotep Jesus said, I brought it back around that to the solutions where, I look at these two movements, and I don't want to go through the whole thing all over again like I did there. That one was in detail. But I look at these two movements that formed in 2010, 2011, that we knew as Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party movements as precursors.
Yep.
And people looked at this, especially in the media, and then all of us and how we consumed it, and we said, oh, they're total opposites and whatever, and they have nothing fucking in common. Their solutions were kind of opposite. In some cases.
Yep.
Some things actually met all the way. If you asked each of them, though, they would never admit that, but it's true.
For sure.
Their solutions had a lot of opposites in them, though, but their complaints were the same. The difference was Occupy was composed of younger, white, urban liberals, by and large, and the Tea Party movement was composed of rural, older, white, blue-collar workers, so to speak. But their complaints about a system that had left them behind and was giving them no opportunities, leaving them, whether it be college students who can't get a great job with all this fucking debt that they were told to sign when they were 17, and they're screwed for the rest of their life, and there's no job market because the economy had collapsed in the global recession, or if you were the 45-year-old factory worker whose jobs were sent abroad and you were ignored by all of Washington, D.C. and told to go fuck yourself. These are the Occupy and the Tea Party primes right there.
Exactly.
And so I saw the movement of that rise through two people, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, other than being from New York and having, their respective New York accents, there's not a lot that they would like to admit that they have in common.
They can't?
They almost can't. Yeah, they can't. You're right. But they do on a few things. Like in China, you listen to Bernie talk about China, talks very similarly to how Trump does. Mm-hmm. And I like how they both talk about it. I agree with them. But there's a lot of things where it's like, Bernie wants to tax people 70%, 75%. Donald's like, that's socialism, fuck that, and I'll agree more with Trump in that scenario as an example. And then there's other stuff where Bernie's going to talk about social issues we have and Trump's going to assume that they don't exist, and I'm going to agree with Bernie in that scenario. Exactly. But the way that they spoke to people was through messaging where they were speaking to the same people. They were just using different examples of how to fix it.
Yep.
They were speaking to the same disaffected, angry person who felt that they'd been left behind by society, by the powers that be, a wealth gap that was out of control, education opportunities that were in name only, and a country that was no longer about an American dream. It was about an American dream being dead, which I think is literally a line Donald Trump used on the campaign trail, which I don't agree with. But, at least there are some people who feel like we're so far behind we can't get there. Mm-hmm. Add into the fact that you've had a lot of people who have been left behind forever. be it minority communities in urban areas, or, you know, people who have been in some of those same people within those parties who maybe didn't join those movements, who existed. We use this stereotype like out in West Virginia, the coal miner towns. I'm not so sure a lot of those people were at Tea Party movements. Maybe they were. But like they were getting whisked away and not given an opportunity to do something new forever. They were born into it, you know?
Exactly.
These people are all the same. And so for you to say that, and that we get so used to this discourse on social media that says we are each other's enemy, and point to the fact that maybe we just have different solution ideas, but at the end of the day, we should want the same things. We need more people like you talking like that, because I don't think there's a good argument against you.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I had to learn that over time. You have to have those conversations, and you need to meet people outside your background. And which is why, like, you know, they talk about now, like, diversity is such an important thing now, but I feel like you need to get that early. You need to get that early on. And I feel like the social structure of this country just deteriorates that movement from happening. You know, you're not getting a lot of those diverse conversations happening at an early age. As you said, like, the coal miners in the Midwest are not necessarily talking to the average black guy and growing up in the projects in those urban communities, you know. I think we need to start, you know, to be honest, I would love to have like a facilitated, you know, version of a podcast where you have children talking to each other. You know, I feel like that would be really cool. You know, just mindsets that haven't been, you know, diluted by social media yet, you know, diluted by, you know, their surroundings quite yet, or just manipulated by their parents just yet, but just encouraging diverse conversations at a young age to encourage them to keep having those diverse conversations. Because, like I said, like, I feel like you need to. We're taught to go our separate ways more so than us being born wanting to, you know, divide our own selves. But yeah, that came out of nowhere. But I just thought on the spot, like, I would love to see that. Kids talking to each other on a podcast from different backgrounds.
I've
see
said
what they think.
I've said in the past.
Solutions.
I don't know if I said it on this podcast, but I've said it to people maybe when we're done or whatever. I think that a divorce lawyer's worst nightmare would be forcing people to come into a studio like this, an estranged couple, and lock the door and tell them to put headphones on their ears at full blast and talk to each other. Yeah. I don't know that we'd have divorce lawyers anymore, because there is a level to which this communication, and you're experiencing it now. You experienced it a bit last summer because you knew about this before it was all launching when you were here. But there's a level to which this communication is the most personal thing somebody can do. And you weren't even given that example. You were just saying like straight up conversations and like maybe do it on a podcast or whatever. So I guess a little bit, but imagine now taking it to something this, like with a studio like this, the darkened outside, like nothing exists and people are just having a conversation. That's what you do. Yeah. You know, do I think it's realistic that we're going to make that happen? No. But do I think we can encourage that and set examples that other people are going to follow? Absolutely, man. That would be awesome.
Hell yeah. And it starts with, like, you know, podcasts like these. And I actually, it was funny you talked about divorce lawyers, but your boy Moose, I was, you know, watching that episode, and, you know, he talked about, you know, even discrepancies that happen within marriages. You know, when one cheats, it's usually there's something that's already broken. And if they would have just communicated with each other, like, there was something that was lost in the communication within that relationship that caused them to go their separate ways. Also, too, I just think it's a generational thing. I'm not going to lie. I feel like we're now more than ever, we're encouraged to talk. We're encouraged to express how we feel now, so more than ever. I say that specifically because there's a generation, I think you can agree, our parents' generation, men didn't talk to each other about emotions, really. That wasn't really an encouraged conversation, at least from, let's say, our dads to their grandfathers or stuff like that. Maybe, hopefully, they were encouraged, but I know for, like, my dad and even, like, my mother, like, just, you were taught to hold on to certain things. You were taught to hold on to certain emotions. You were taught to just stay headstrong, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and keep your head, you know, moving forward. And I think that caused a lot of, you know, obviously silence among men, but a lot of, you know, emotional distress, and a lot of unneeded emotional distress, in a sense of, you know, men not releasing. And I think that when we talk, we find more commonalities than we find differences. And, you know, I think that now that we have podcasts, we have, you know, YouTube, we have social media. Yes, we talked about the horrors of it and the echo chambers that happen out of it, but I also find there's beauty in it, as in there's more conversations happening, I would say.
That is beautiful. The downside is the instantaneous access and swipe by swipe 5-second attention span society that still does exist on like a regular throughout the day.
Yep.
Right? So things that you are not familiar with or don't consume yourself, someone can selectively take that out of context. Yep. It happens every single day in literally every single thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with conversations like this, it's kind of weird. I'm numb to it. And maybe it's easier because I'm smaller and I have a smaller fan base right now. Maybe it'll be harder when I have a bigger one. But, you know, there's hundreds of hours of me talking with other people now on here, to say nothing of people come in here for a long time and talk. So there's at least a couple hours of them talking. You know, I wonder how they feel. They don't do this every day. But like for me, it's like, you know where I am. You know who I am. You can't hide when you're doing that much content talking. Like when it's natural like this, you can't put on, I can't put on a face. I tell you how I feel, for better or worse. You certainly see my flaws. Hopefully you see the things that aren't flaws. And like we go from there.
Yep.
But in that, it's like, how many people really understand that? Exactly. How many people would be willing to do that themselves? Not many. And like, it's not tooting my own horn. I feel bad for those people because I was one of them for a long time. I was like, let's stay above that shit, dude. I wasn't even actually like big on social media for a long time. I was like, you know, hence I don't do that.
For sure.
Right? I had to come into this. But if more people could do it, they wouldn't take things so out of control, in my opinion. And I think the thing that gets blurred the most is intent. So we like to call out one-liners or momentary lack of context situations and paint it as this is why we should cancel that person.
Yep.
Or say this is what it is. There is not an intent in what they're saying. I've even seen people who are on tape saying, you know, racial terms in the past. And, you know, in some cases, like, who was it? The Seinfeld guy, Kramer?
Yeah.
That was years
Kramer.
ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what it was.
Yeah.
You know, that was not selectively edited. You know what it was. In other cases, there were people who were literally just, like, in the context of an educated conversation, repeating things to be able to set the table for what they were saying right there. There was no intent. There was the famous example a few years ago where the Netflix executive got fired for saying the N-word in a meeting where they were talking specifically about the N-word in the context of content that they were going to be releasing. Do I think that guy meant to say the N-word to hurt black people? No, I do not. And I don't know him, right? But there was no intent on that in all likelihood. It was probably careless to say it. But it's also, when you're in a 2-hour meeting where you are discussing it, I think I'm so trained in my head to not fucking go there at all. I probably wouldn't, but I could see someone who's a perfectly good individual who's like trying to discuss the nature of this going there. I mean, shit, we have movies where actors we know have to say it because they're playing in the Civil War South.
Yep.
Do I think they feel comfortable saying that? Am I going to judge Paul Giamatti because I heard him say that word 1,000,000 times in 12 Years a Slave? No, I'm not.
Yep.
There's a context to stuff. So in our society, even though we can have these conversations, I have no doubt that people can pick apart things I've said and things my guests have said, where if you take a 15-second highlight and you just play that for people who don't know who they are, oh, you're going to think we're monsters.
For sure.
You're going to think we're total monsters. So I don't think that's the ultimate, like, it's a good thing some of it's happening. And I'm glad that I can be a part of it here and add to it. And I don't run away from it. And I'm kind of fatalistic about that. So we'll see how that works out. But, you know, I don't think it's solving problems yet because we still have a majority of society who wants to say, what's the 5-second bite? Oh, that's what it is. Boop, cancel.
Exactly. And exactly what you said. We're not getting to solutions because we're cutting off the conversation completely. And also, too, this is just an attribute to yourself. A reason why you're able to do this because you know yourself. As you said, it took time to know you. But for the viewers who are just getting to know you, these types of conversations aren't all on videotape. Like, we've been having conversations about this since 2011, fall 2011, when we first met. And this has always been you. So you're doing your thing. And it's just, you know yourself, which is why you're thriving at it now. And that's how you know how to have a foundational, you know how to have your foot in the ground and not hear certain punchlines and jump on a riffraff on
Thank you.
how wrong or bad someone is.
Yes.
And you actually kind of taught me that. I remember us having a conversation about the infamous Candace Owens and the cancel culture. I mean, I think it's for the viewers that know the cancel culture when it comes to that, especially if you're someone who's leaning left or liberal. But after having a conversation with you, not that you're a believer and a follower of her, but you gave light as into you should listen to the full conversations instead of the TikTok or punchlines that people put out there, the taglines. I feel like because of the fact that she's a TV personality, she's not the best example because there are purpose punchlines that she puts in her content. But I was also just taking in the content. Like I actually sat down and watched a few episodes just to hear what she had to say.
You went in like her podcast or
the Candace Owens show and like literally sat down and watched it.
Can we talk about this?
Sure.
Are you cool talking about her?
Yeah.
Right now? Okay. Because I want to stay with your overall point, but I don't want to get that lost in the shuffle. Because to be clear, I'm not a fan of hers.
You're not.
I don't like her. But one of the things I've talked about with you off camera that fuck it, let's do it on camera right now, is that I have criticized her on this show maybe like 2 or 3 different times, but I'm very light with it because, and I think this is a good thing. I do not, I borrow my friend Terrence Jones' line, who said this perfectly on an early podcast we did. I do not want to attack her intellect.
Nope.
She's a very smart woman, and she happens to be a very smart black woman. And some of the things she says are like, yeah, she's right about that. My issue with her is that she does exactly what, forget black people for a second. She does exactly what people on the left want her to do.
Yep, exactly.
She goes far off the deep end with things and contradicts the fuck out of herself all the time, just like people on the left do. Yep. This is my problem with the left and right. They contradict the fuck out of themselves because it's a constant circle. Political beliefs are constantly shifting from one side to the other. Yep. And it happens in real time now because we get tweets that happen every day. We get quick snippets from podcasts that happen. And I think that she crushes so many of the good things she says that aren't conservative or liberal. Like she says shit that Louis Farrakhan says that I agree with.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of Louis Farrakhan either, right? But she kills some of those things that she could be doing to set an example for not just her community. Forget just the black community. Don't make it about that. Make it about like all people, right? Too. But yes, absolutely within her own community as well. And she gives the fuel to the fire to the worst of the white leftists to be able to shut her down.
Yes, exactly.
Do you agree somewhat with that? Not at all. Like,
oh yeah, it's sitting there and watching her episodes were not easy at all. Like I said, because she is a personality, I feel like there's an incentive for her to do those punchline buzz like triggering statements that she does say. But like something that you mentioned is that some of her ideas are legitimate, and it's more so about the goal in mind that she has in mind, and less so about how she thinks we should get there. But like you mentioned, like her relationship with like Killer Mike, they disagree on a lot of things, but they have some common ground in some other areas. And
I love Killer Mike, by the way.
Exactly.
And I don't agree with him on everything, but he's great.
But he's someone that will always keep it real and says how he feels. And I feel like people need to get comfortable with just feeling a little uncomfortable.
Yes.
Acknowledge that someone's going to disagree from what you believe, and that is okay. And sometimes, and you were talking about intent for a little bit, sometimes, you want to believe like everyone doesn't have the wrong intent. Some people do have the wrong intent.
Yes.
Some people don't know. Some people have an outcome that comes completely opposite to what their intent was.
Yes.
And they backtrack like, oh, okay, that's where I see like that went wrong. But in the case with like Candace, I feel like because she's a personality, her intent is sometimes to just aggravate and push to get the viewers. It's all about the views, all about the clicks, and all about the clickbait. But I actually learned a lot, and I actually learned, and actually to get off her, like I just looked more about. I never really even. I don't have a lot of. I can't name one. Just black conservative friend. I come from, South Bronx, New York. Like most of my circle, we come from the same background, have the same ideas and viewpoints because we have the same upbringing.
Sure.
But I do not have a lot of like black conservative friends at all. And it's like, maybe start having those conversations. Why not? And it's not about, oh, let me see where I can dissect your argument and let me prove you wrong. It's not about that at all. It's like, let me hear your side of the story. Let me hear your side of the take. What are the stats? And also, too, like, one thing that you will see, too, I feel like when you watch, CNN or when you watch Fox or when you watch left, right media feed, we have two completely different sets of data. We talk.
Data? Data?
You want to call it that?
Yeah. It's like, I don't think I see much data.
Someone's numbers are just completely different from someone else's numbers. And it's like, how can we even have a conversation if the story that we're getting is completely different?
Yes.
So it's like, one, what is the data we should be following?
Great question.
And two, and that goes into like, how do we get to the solution? But that's why I want to have solution-based questions, because it's not about bashing. It's not about proving you wrong. It's about how do we get to where we want to go, which, like I said earlier, like as a good human, I feel like we are aligned on where we want to go. You
know what the problem is, though? You know what gets the clicks.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Opposite.
Yeah.
So, like, before I say this, because here's a prime example of someone that's going to take something out of context. You will see all the time, whenever someone doesn't like a black woman's opinion, the stereotype goes right to, like, angry black woman. Candace Owens, not as a black woman, is very angry in how she speaks. So is Ben Shapiro. So are the Pod Save America guys. So is Steven Crowder. So is all these other examples. My point is people who are very far on one side or the other, and Candace Owens is very far on the right side, right? Whether you have someone far on the left, far on the right, they speak in constant anger. Now, should you be angry sometimes? You're goddamn right you should. I get angry on this show. We have some episodes that are more angry than anything about the state of society, very often at those two fucking sides. But like, there's flows to it. We have fun here too. We laugh. This is a very serious episode we're doing right now because we're having a serious conversation. But like, I'll have fucking Mike Spear in here. I'll have Gio Caradonis in here. We'll have a great fucking time.
Exactly.
And even like Gio's mad at the world about some shit. But it's like, it's light. It's not like, we're all fucking dying out there. That kind of thing. These people in these politicized ends, including her, and I just include her in it like every other person, they come at it from such a viscerally pissed off mood all the time that they're constantly looking for a battle. They're looking for something to destroy. It's not like, what's all the videos you see like online with like Ben Shapiro? It's like destroying libs. It's literally what they're called. Like, let me destroy a lib on a video. Like, how many fucking times are you going to watch that and then think that that's supposed to be the norm? I'm not, sometimes like I'm sure he makes great arguments and whatever, but it's just constant just being like pissed off.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't like that. I don't care what color or gender you are. I don't like that. And so I'm going to, just like I call out other people who are not black women, I'm going to call out Candace on that because in my opinion, that's what she feeds off of.
Yes. And like, I also want to acknowledge too, because I feel like your other examples were also male too. I want to acknowledge that there's also the angry woman, I feel like is a statement, and the angry black man is also a statement. So I'm saying black women are it's the double negative. She's black and she's a woman. If you see a woman
that's
coming out, speaking up, no, but it is a double negative.
I know what you mean.
You're battling discrimination against women. You're battling discrimination against being black.
Yep.
So there is a double negative there. So it's like, even in general, if you see an angry woman, just yelling and stuff like that, oh, she's not ladylike. Oh, that's not how a woman should carry herself. And there's just that stigma, and if you're African American, you're black, and you're just mad at what's going on right now. Why is he so angry? He's just upset. He doesn't know how to control his emotions. So if you're a black woman, you're automatically given that double negative.
Huge double standard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a huge double standard.
Exactly. And I think we should scrap that. But it definitely feeds into the narrative of that angry black woman, scenario. And that's because they do have the double negative.
I like, though, that, how this came up, what you were saying, that you just were going to look for other opinions. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I do that all the time, right? And I can pretty much find that anywhere. You are finding it in new places, because I guess, like, you were telling me earlier today when we were driving over here that, like, you weren't a big podcast guy until a year or two ago?
Yeah.
Something like that?
For sure. And, like, you're given a lot more access to, there's the amount of podcasts that are out there now are just, like, they're exploding. And people are listening. And also too, it's just for me, I like to learn. Like, we've always had conversations about different, beliefs, different backgrounds, and we've, agreed on a lot of things and we disagreed on a lot of things. But I feel like having those types of conversations is just so important to someone's, that's how we get to solutions. We need to be able to have the conversations. We need to be comfortable with disagreeing with each other. We need to be comfortable with, being wrong.
Yes.
The legendary Nick Grohl said, "It's okay to change your mind." I believe he said it in the podcast. It's okay to change your mind. And we have to be. It's okay to backtrack on what you said previously. Like, we just need to learn. And I feel like personally seeking other perspectives than your own is very important. Even me as a minority doesn't mean because I'm a black man I know all there is to be about being a minority and I have all the answers. And I'm gonna stay in my little bubble and I'm right, you're wrong. You're racist, and that's it. Like, that's just not. That's not going to be a solution to anything. So it takes those conversations, and it takes conversations amongst black people, because it's not a monolithic experience either. Like I said, like a lot of conservative. There are a good number of conservative black people out there. I don't have them personally as friends, but like I should seek their opinions on things. I want to look for it. I want to look for all of it, just to see where they're coming from.
I think that, and this is not the phrase I want to use because it has the wrong connotation, but as someone who does not like that monolithic system of the two parties and the two schools of thought, and therefore does not think just because one thing's not working, the other thing should be, I do think, though, that having black conservatives, including Candace Owens, is a very necessary evil.
Yep.
Because to me, an example that's come up in some of the conversations on this show is when you see the consistent argument from Republicans. They're like, well, you've been voting Democrat for 70 years and it's not working. You're still in a bad spot. They're right, but I hate the argument.
Yep.
Because the argument is, so you might as well try something else. Yep. Just vote for us. Yep. Well, they've never really given a fuck, by and large. Maybe some of them have, but most of them haven't. And I also hate saying this line. It's an awful thing to say, but it's true. You have to say it. At least the Democrats take the time to go pander to people in urban communities. Yeah. The Republicans just go, I'll figure it out.
And it could be lying straight to your face, but they take the time.
But they take the time. Yep. It's like an evil thing to say, but it's true.
No, for sure.
So I look at this and I go, well, prime example of not having a solution on either side, but if we're going to get a healthy discourse going, you need to at least inject, if you have all one polarization within a given context or community or tribe, whatever it is, you need to inject the other side just to get the opportunity for people in the middle of the pile to come in. And that's one thing I noticed in this last election. I don't have numbers for you. I don't even know if these numbers would be reliable, if they even exist. But there were a lot of black people who didn't go vote for Trump because they're like, well, fuck this, right? They're not going to go there. But they didn't go vote for Biden. They said, fuck it. No. Yeah. And I respected the hell out of that. And I think a lot of that started from conversations from black conservatives who voted with both hands for Trump. Again, they're allowed to do that, just like you're allowed to vote for Biden with both hands. But there seems to be in the black community as well some of the same things I'm seeing in other communities, like just larger communities where I don't define it by race or whatever, just like in this country, where there are people like me who maybe have even been on both sides, like me. I think there are plenty of people like that. But people who maybe have never been on one or the other and are saying, yo, fuck this. I'm done with these choices right now, because what I'm seeing is this world of all these complex issues and two parties who are just two ideologies who are going so farther and farther and farther apart on every single issue. These are millions of issues. When someone votes on their one or two things that are actually important to them, respect that. Yeah. But it's also, think about all the other things you're technically voting for when you do that. Yeah. And then it's viewed as an endorsement when you do. Do I think that everyone that voted for Trump or everyone that voted for Biden should, their vote, if they're honest about it and say, I voted for so-and-so, should be considered an endorsement? No, I do not. That's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. But that's what we do in society.
For sure.
That's what we do.
Yeah, and any like-minded person is not going to be 100% one candidate or on policy-wise and 100% on another candidate. There's just no way. If you're actually paying attention, there's just no way. And you're actually thinking about it on a deeper level. Look at their ideas on taxes, their ideas on labor, their ideas on immigration. Like, I feel like somewhere you're gonna find, all right, maybe I agree with this side more than this side. I just feel like it's normal. But I feel like as a solution, one, we need to be after. I feel like we elect our, politicians we want to lead, and then we don't hold them accountable.
Yeah,
we don't hold them accountable. And I think we're just glad that we got the lesser of the two evils in the office, and we call it a day and job well done. And I'll see you 4 years later from now.
Couldn't agree more with that, man.
And if you're paying attention, I agree just as much with you. Like, when you just look at these two different sides, and it's just like neither one are the solution. And like people who are diehard Democrats, we've had plenty of bad Democratic policies, plenty of them, plenty of bad Republican policies. We need to stop leaning so hard left or right and hold, like, all right, if you were voting Democrat and you wanted these things to be taken care of, were they taken care of? No. Why are you not holding them accountable in the next election? Or even in your local elections, where I feel like is even the most important if you want a direct effect to your community too. But yeah, we need to hold our politicians accountable completely.
And you can be able to say that there is significant negative even where positive exists.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to get a lot of heat for this one, but fuck it. We'll go there. When I look at the presidents since Jimmy Carter, let's say, and you ask me who I think the most effective president was from an overall society, monolithically, right? Just every human being, where things were going. The answer is Bill Clinton to me. And yet, I will then say also as well that Bill Clinton is not a good guy, number one. Like, appears to be a very, very bad guy.
Yep.
Though I do laugh at some of the stuff, I'll admit. Like, he's fucking, guy's a goddamn hound. Anyway, he's not a good guy. And he also authored the 94 crime bill,
exactly.
which was incredibly damaging.
Yep.
That buck, I think, started long before he was there, though. Doesn't excuse that.
Yeah, for sure.
He also, by the way, repealed Glass-Steagall, which was the precursor that set up what would be the housing crisis.
Yep.
Do I think he could have foreseen that? Possibly. Do I think that he did that knowing that that was going to happen? Absolutely not. Do I think that we can blame the whole thing on him because of that? No, I do not. A lot of other things happen after that. But, these are truths. These are things that I'm not even talking about the fucking blowjob. I don't care about that. Like, it's whatever, But think about that bar. That's a low bar. Because our bar is also our expectations of getting everything we want on an individual level from our politicians is also so high. And yes, I think there's all kinds of trades and evils that happen, but I've been thinking recently about the show The West Wing. Did you ever watch that?
The West Wing.
So
Throwback, but
that was back when Aaron Sorkin was still on Blow and a great writer. sorry, yeah. He's still a great writer, but when I shouldn't say that, but he was fucking great when he was on Blow. But he created this idealistic White House.
Yeah.
Cynically, sadly, it can't exist like that. But I remember a scene, I think it was in the first season, where the president, played by Martin Sheen, Jed Bartlett, was at some little press conference in the White House, and he was being asked by, I think, someone in the press corps or something who was not media or something like that, somebody who he was friends with, who had supported his election, who he now fucked with a recent bill. And it was on NBC, so they couldn't say fucked. But he answered the question. It was a gotcha question, goes, what do you have to say to the people who you told that you would never let blank, and I read a quote from your campaign, you would never let happen, and now you just signed a bill that allows people to do . And he looked down and he nodded his head and he looked back up and he'd say, I'd say I screwed you. And I remember watching that. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a great scene. And he goes, I screwed you. It's true. I can't get around that. Yeah. And if you're not going to vote for me because of that, I fully support that and respect that because I screwed you. Yep. He said, when you get into this job, you made a lot of promises that maybe you didn't think of. And I'm paraphrasing people. These aren't the exact words, but this was his message. that maybe you didn't think of when you were on the campaign trail and saying you were going to do all these goddamn different things, that maybe some of them are going to fly in the face of each other and you're going to have to make hard decisions. But at the end of the day, if you still promised it and you screwed somebody on it, you cannot ever say that they don't have a reason to not support you afterwards.
For sure.
And so I did screw you, and here's why, because I think that the things we gained from this bill are promises I made, number one, and things that actually on my list of importance are higher. And that's why I made the decision.
For sure.
And it's like, imagine a politician saying that in real life. They never would.
Honest,
and yet, I think it could play well. Would they get taken out of context on social media like crazy? Fuck yes. But do I think a lot of people who support them will put it into context?
Yeah.
Fuck yes.
Respect the honesty.
And it's like, where can we get that these days? I don't know. That's how I live my life, but I'm not a politician, and I don't like saying never. I never fucking want to be one. It is
no interest.
It is
Absolutely
the worst of the worst. But like, that is a utopian idea to me, sadly. But I wish we could have that type of bluntness in our discourse. And I think the closest thing we come is to having content like this, conversations from normal Joes like this.
Yeah. And I have a question for you. Will we ever have, with the current system in place, could we ever have a fully effective president? Could they do it in 4 years?
No.
Two, because I feel like we've seen it between the recent like Trump administration and Obama administration. A lot of the first things were just undoing the other person's past 4 years.
I think in different ways they both walked into a bad situation.
Yep.
Obama worse, to be honest.
So I just feel like even if, let's say we had the ideal candidate, right? Got voted in. Can they give us what we want? Could they do it in 8 years?
Everything? No.
Yep.
A lot? Yes. That it does make me think of Obama a lot, though, because Obama inherited the worst deck that any president had inherited since FDR. He had a destroyed economy, endless wars that were bullshit that we got into, a totally fucked up, just everything was fucked up. And I have a lot of empathy for some of the campaign promises that he broke. Empathy is a strong word. I have an understanding of some of the ones that he broke, and the most extreme one that causes a visceral reaction in a lot of people is like the wars and the drone usage and stuff like that, things he said he was going to stop. I've talked about that at length in a couple podcasts. I think that is a lot harder to understand, especially given what he walked into and everything that was going on, and the fact that, let's be honest, he was a domestic guy. He was very green foreign policy-wise. This was a junior senator from Chicago. You know, he was not focused on Middle East policy much before he got into office. So to get off that, I look at Obama as an example of the context you were bringing up about effectiveness because, you know, I liked him. I was a fan. That was during my era when I was on the left. And the era that came after being on the left was one where I was on the right, which coincided with when Trump was coming up. And I was like a big Trumper.
Yep.
I was very disappointed in Obama's second term. I thought his first term, when people were like, oh, he didn't have a good one and he may blow it and I don't know that he's going to win re-election. First of all, he was running against Mitt Romney, who was like a human fucking stick.
Yeah.
So I was pretty sure he was going to win, and he did easily. And then Mitt Romney did like the 47% of America thing, and it was over. But secondly, I thought like there was a lot of kicking the can down the curb with some policies in the first administration, but I also was like, he did a lot of what he had to do. You know, like look at that financial crisis he walked into. Like he did a lot. I forgave him for like hiring all the bankers to be on his goddamn cabinet, which now I have a different feel about. But at the time I was like, yeah, there's a huge, I don't know there, but also like who the hell is going to understand the system to be able to help out? Like it's like deal with the devil kind of thing.
For sure.
The second term, though, is where your question about can they be effective in 8 years makes me even hesitate there, because you remember when he was caught on a hot mic, I think saying to Putin, or no, it was one of Putin's key guys. They were on a stage and he leaned over to him on a hot mic right before the 2012 election and he said, you know, tell Putin if I win the election here, I'm going to have a lot more leeway, you know, room to do things or whatever, which cynically, he's right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're playing to win the election. It's sad, but that's how our system works. It's how every fucking politician is, Trump included. And, the idea is that then he's going to act on that. And he didn't act on that.
Yep.
And he apologized for America around the world, which is something that I can never fully get behind that. And he also, one of the things that Trump did very well when he came into office is ISIS was no more. Obama took a very back seat to that. And so there were certain things that stuck out more for me. Mm-hmm. And then I use those visceral examples to now look at it from the context I have, which is I probably wouldn't vote for him again, wouldn't vote for Trump again. And so I'm kind of like cynical above all of them. And I'll say that he missed a lot of chances. Mm-hmm. And he missed a lot of chances because there was too much cover your ass and too many trying to get a legacy through rather than the policy that's good for the whole. There was too much of not willing to say, I screwed you to people, instead screwing people by passivity, not doing anything, and then saying, like, I didn't do anything to screw you. Yep. I have an issue with that. And, it's not a personal attack. It's an attack on the political system, in my opinion there. But I would like to be able to say, as I did, yes, it's possible that you could affect some sort of change or get the gears going in 8 years. I think you can. In the current system that we have, that we've had for a long time, I don't know that you can. Yep. It will take the system you talked about changing, in my opinion, for that to become a reality.
Yep. And then also, too, you have not only, on the presidential level, but you also have, like, the House and the Senate level, where, like, even if the president wants to do something, he needs to... We have checks and balances for a reason, but at the same time, our system right now is very counterproductive.
Yes. And people were yelling at Pelosi and Schumer for going at Trump at every end. I disagreed with it too. I thought they were ridiculous. But you can't yell at that if you supported McConnell doing it for 8 years to Obama.
Yeah.
Because it was the same thing.
Exactly.
Now, let me ask you this.
Sure.
What about if that system is not there, though? And any president, Obama, Trump, Clinton, Bush, could do whatever the fuck they wanted to do.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Exactly. You definitely need something. That's where it gets messy, because checks and balances were put in place for a reason. Maybe we need a third. I think political parties should just be over and done with, to be honest with you. House and Senate can be there, but to have a majority left House, majority right Senate, that's where it gets messy, is because you're supporting the political side agenda rather than being the House and then being the Senate. I feel like I feel like the House is saying we're majority right, we're going to do this not right now, but then you have the Senate saying we're majority left, we're going to push this agenda. And I just feel like the dual parties make it counterproductive. But the House and the Senate as an institution themselves aren't what's wrong. You need the checks and balances. I just feel like it's the left and the right that makes it counterproductive, if that makes sense.
What do you think of terms and the fact that there's unlimited terms in Congress and Senate?
I think that's BS. Yeah. Completely. Yep. You need, that's the reason why we look at pictures of our House and Senate, and you see no knock against old people, but you see very old people who've just been there all the time when new ideas aren't getting pushed into, which is what we need, new ideas, not the same old ideas. We need new ideas being pushed into the conversation. And unlimited or 10-year, whatever you call it, it's BS.
I think that's maybe the biggest problem we have. Mm-hmm. Because let's say we went extreme, and I'd have to think this through. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but let's just play with the hypothetical. Senate terms are 6 years. Let's make House terms 6 years too, just in our hypothetical.
Sure.
You're allowed to serve one term.
Sure.
It's less than 8 that the full president can get into elections, but also more than 4. You said, can I get it done in 4 or 8? Let's split it halfway. Let's split the goalpost and say that every single person could serve one term. 6 years. And maybe you could serve in the House and then go to the Senate if you win an election duly, or the other way around. But once you do one in each, once you do one in somewhere, you can't be there again. I think that would solve so many fucking problems because no one would be concerned about trying to win an election. You would still have the legacy concern. People are always concerned about what people think of them in the long term, even if no one really gives a fuck. Everyone thinks they're important. But you would lose that, oh, this donor needs this thing, and I'm going to need them in that next election. I need this group of people. It would take away so much of identity politics because once people are in there, they'd be making calls based on what they see. More, trust me, there'd still be some shit.
Yeah.
You and I know that. Humans are fallible.
For sure.
But I think that's the word. But there would be so much more control, in my opinion.
And I'll accompany that idea with no private funding of campaigns.
What do you mean by that?
So, like, if you're a big oil industry or you're, you know, I'm not saying banish it, but there should be a cap on the amount that you can contribute.
There technically is now.
There technically is now.
But they get around it.
Yes. So I feel like there should just be more of a strict, maybe, regulation on how much money a particular industry or company can contribute to a campaign. Because obviously, as you said earlier, follow the money.
That might have been the most disappointing thing about Trump, man.
Yeah.
Of all the disappointing things. Because he did have, regardless, like, people can argue about some of his policies when he was coming in that they hate, and that's fine. Like, he had plenty of things that were certainly polarizing. Immigration just being one example. But one thing he did have going for him that as an American, if you could, and most people couldn't, but if you could step back and be like, okay, well, I got to root for him to do well right now. One thing he had going for him was he was an outsider, right? And at the end, in the back end, the Hillary portion of the campaign, let's say like after June 2016, he was funding outside of his own self-funding, right? He was taking money. But there was a cap on it because he hadn't been doing it all the way through. And then when he did, early on in his presidency, he did say fuck you to a couple donors who then came in to cash in their chit, right? He stopped doing that, though. Then he took all money. His entire second campaign was funded by fucking other people.
Yep.
You know? And, like, he's this billionaire or whatever. And, like, I understand it's, you know, you're fighting against a war chest, so you can't totally self-fund, but, like, that's the fallacy there. Because there were decisions in that administration that were made based on pre-existing beliefs that were going to lose him support. One that went under the rug that was brilliantly exposed recently in a documentary was the Saudi Arabia policy. Did you see this documentary, The Dissident?
No.
It's fucking incredible.
The Dissident?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the documentary Icarus on Netflix about the Russian doping?
No. It's on Netflix?
Oh my God, dude, you got to watch that. Yeah, you will love that. It was this guy, Brian Fogel, I think that's his name, wanted to do a documentary like 5 years ago, about how easy it is to get around drug testing and cycling because he's a fan of cycling, good amateur cyclist himself. So he wanted to compete in a major amateur cycling race that has stringent drug testing like the pros. And he wanted to document himself taking every drug imaginable for like 6 months, competing and not getting caught to expose the whole thing. Genius. Right? So he starts to work with a doctor who he gets hooked up with a Russian doctor who runs the, it's like called the, I forget the term on it, but it's basically like the anti-doping agency in Russia.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be catching people, right? And you remember how Russia was later banned from the Olympics? It was because of this documentary. He soon, the guy he got in touch with was a brilliant doctor, nicest guy ever. Almost, I don't want to like say this the wrong way, but almost like a Borat stereotype though. Like, hello, Brian, how are you? Like literally like that, but brilliant guy. And so one day they would talk on Skype all the time and he would help him with the masking agents and how to take the drugs, whatever. So one day he goes, Brian, my life is in danger. And Brian Fogel's like, what the fuck? And he goes, I can explain later. I must get out of country. Can you get me to America? And so like they get him to America and the documentary turns into something entirely new because he exposes the fact that not only is he not the anti-doping guy as he's listed, he's the guy helping them all hide it. They were doping everyone except the figure skaters, which they thought wasn't beneficial. They determined over time it didn't help them. So they were doping everyone else, and it exposed this whole thing. But that guy, his next documentary he did, Brian Fogel, after doing that one, which won the Oscar, and has been viewed, I think, like 800 million times or something on Netflix. Yeah. It's like one of the most popular things ever done there. He made a documentary called The Dissident, and it was about Jamal Khashoggi's killing. He was the reporter who was killed in the Turkish embassy, who worked for the Washington Post, and it was shady, and it was determined the Saudi government ordered it. And so what he talked about was the fact that he among the things he uncovered was that the Trump administration completely covered for Mohammed bin Salman, who's the crown prince who ordered this, and they believe was on the video screen in the Saudi consulate in Turkey watching Jamal Khashoggi get murdered. I don't think they have officially confirmed that. Yeah. That's one thing but they've confirmed. They have the transcripts, recordings. They killed him. Yeah. It was on his orders. Trump covered for him because Trump is very strong on Israel, right? And bin Salman has been very good for Israel. He leads Saudi Arabia, right? Country around there. Israel has a lot of nut friends in that area. Saudi Arabia has been good for Israel. Keep it in order. And it's this typical trade that you see where it's like, oh, well, my donors think that. And I also kind of think that too. So this guy's a jerk off. But we're going to cover for the fact that he's murdering a media member in broad fucking daylight on another country's soil. Yeah. And it's just going to be cool. And it just goes to show you that even a guy like Trump, who was supposed to be an outsider, became the same thing. Exactly. Insider.
But yeah, I definitely think we need new blood in the political realm. We need new voices. We need younger voices, more diverse voices. No such thing as the right type of minority for our conversation earlier, but you just need it in there. You need more conversations. You need more disagreements, and you need more debates. But I mean, do you believe we want to get there in this lifetime?
Remember, I'm a cynic, dude. I have these
Not
conversations.
that we should be non-believers, but
I have these conversations to help.
There's just so many levels to it.
There's so many things as I get older, I realize how uncomplicated we actually are. Yeah. We're so weird as humans. We are simultaneously the most fucking complicated, wild things ever, and also the simplest beings of sticking to the same fucking patterns over and over again of all time. Yeah. And I look at how people are, you know, like my friend John Rondi his dad has a great line where he says there's many people are just pretending to be busy. Something you learn as you get older. So true. I also heard an old quote that I don't know if it was Jim Carrey. I saw it attributed to him on social media years ago, and I think about it all the time, where he said, the older I get, the more and more I realize just how much people pretend, how little they actually know outside of the one thing that they happen to know if they're like good at something. Yeah. And so when you have people who have the same only 24 hours in a day, we haven't invented new hours yet, you know, maybe we'll get there, and who still got to sleep 6 or 7 of them, still have to pay bills. 8. Right, yeah, whatever. Well, you're healthy. Hey, 8 sleep. You heard that one. So anyway, side note, which I got to get you one of those. You'll love that. But
shout out Horo.
Shout out Horo, baby. Great company. Anyway, you know, people have lives. They have priorities. They have things to do. There's only so much they can worry about. They may be able to talk about something that's popular to complain about because they hear about it a little bit on social media, but how much are they actually going to spend the time to dedicate 3 hours a day to changing it? Yeah. Are you and I going to do that? Actually, you know, this is the most I do with it, which is a lot better than 99.999% of society, not to toot my own horn, but like this is also the career I'm doing.
Exactly.
This is how I'm going to pay the bills. Yeah. We're working on that still. But this is how I'm going to pay the bills. Yeah. Whereas other people, they have another thing that they're doing. I mean, you do too. It's like, so I don't know, man, but I want to go to the follow the money thing because we haven't gone all the way there, but that's what it is. Yeah. These people that have these multiple terms in Congress, they're owned by people. But who are those people owned by? Or who are they also owned by? Foreign interests? Yeah, I think so.
For sure. And also, too, I feel like, I think Terrence Jones said this in his episode, it's like, I also can't tell you what to be passionate about either.
Yeah, that was a great line.
You know? So, like, obviously, race will be important to me because I can't run away from that. I'm addressed with it every day of my life when I wake up. So obviously that's going to be important to me. And that's why I feel like, with the 2016 election, the whole, Trump thing, there were just certain things I just couldn't ignore when going out to the polls.
Yes.
Like there was just certain things about the candidates. Little distrust for both, but one was a little bit lesser of the two evils, as we put before.
Sure.
But let's just say there was one that was just, more out there about it than the other, or the stories about him were more out there and more known. But there's just certain things that, when people go to the booths, that was another thing I've talked about as of late, is how do we feel about people, this is going to be...
Do it.
People simply not voting. And do I think voting should be mandatory? Not necessarily. One, I think voter registration should be a lot better in terms of the way we get people registered to vote, can be a lot smoother. Voter suppression is alive and well. Systems that we need to deteriorate.
Do you care if we sidebar real quick? I want to ask you about that.
Sure.
If that's okay. I'm sorry to get you off your point, but I think that's a more important point for the moment that I want your opinion on. I am not too educated. I shouldn't say.
I can be more educated on it, but
I don't want to say not too educated. I am far from an expert on how all this voter ID stuff works. Mm-hmm. However, while I think that some of the people who are fighting for like the ID are definitely doing it for predatory reasons, certainly an aspect of that, it doesn't mean that the overall group that's fighting for them is wrong, in my opinion. I look at it, for example, and I say, if someone doesn't have a fucking identification, how the fuck do we know that they're a citizen? Mm-hmm. I understand that could affect more communities, but I look at it as also, it's another example of trying to paint a broad picture and say all black people and all Latino people are poor, and therefore they can't go to they can't get their own ID because they're not capable of it, so we need to make sure they can vote without an ID. That's the connotation I take from that. What's your thought there?
Well, it's not saying that all black people and all Latino people are poor and can't get to the booth. It's one of those, lower income communities. We're not giving them access to, let's talk about just transportation to get to the voting booths as one thing. Not everyone owns a car. And, not every town has public transportation to get to the booths. So I feel like there should be more access in terms of transportation. There should be more access in terms of, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an ID, but I just feel like I feel like it's easier to pay your taxes nowadays than it is to register to be a voter.
That might be true. I think I agree with that.
And there's no reason why it should be, if I'm going to pay this country, I feel like it should be easy for me to also say who should run where the money goes that I'm paying every year. So
easier access to taxes, you mean?
Yes, I'm saying like it's easier for you to pay your taxes and find a way to just get your taxes done than it is to like go out and register to vote and get voting done. I feel like, and I just feel like
slightly, yeah. No, I'm just processing it again because I agreed at first and I think I still agree. Yeah,
but I just feel like, so I don't want to sit here and say like, oh, I think voting should be mandatory, because I feel like that it's just not, and it's going to hurt more people than it does help people and help votes. I feel like if you're a taxpayer, there should be some obligation of you to make a choice. And you don't have to, and one of your choices can be neither. But you casted a vote. Because I feel like we get more of a picture of, are people not showing up, or do people don't believe in the leaders that we're putting as candidates? I feel like that gives us a better picture. Because if you're showing up and you're saying, you know what, fuck both of these people, fine. But you casted your vote and you're saying fuck both of these people. Which can also cause a messy thing, because then you get a lot of in-between people. And then like you can get a lot of, hey, let's just fuck up the vote and just all put fucking middle ground. Mm-hmm. But then I think that can also push for reform within the system.
You would need that in mass movement.
Yeah.
Like I knew going into this year that like one of those two was winning.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know.
And I could be talking crazy right now, but I just think that
you're not.
There needs to be reform, and I just feel like we need to do a little bit rethinking of how we're casting votes, and one, getting people registered to vote, and just letting people, allowing access for everyone to cast their opinion. And I just feel like maybe an opinion is fuck the both of these people.
It could be. It's.
I mean, that's
how do you get your voice heard though if it's not a mass movement? Like the closest that ever happened was Ross Perot in '92, I guess, where Clinton won the election, probably because of Ross, right? Yeah. But Ross had, I don't know what the percentage was, but he got double-digit percentage points in that election. That was wild, right? That was where I think some people's voices were heard, and then later they were drowned the fuck out. Yeah. But you would need that sustained. And I knew going into this year that was not a possibility. This was for a lot of people, even if they didn't like them, both of them, they felt a really strong way about one or the other as far as how much they hated them, so they were going to make it a binary choice. So like for me, going in and casting third party was a waste of somebody who was going to have to count my fucking ballot, you know? And I want to get back to the overall point you were making, because I took that sidebar. So let's do that, because I'll get lost on trying to explain another level to that with the voting thing. I don't think it's important right now, but we can come back to it if you want. But the full point you were making about like the access to voting and then going on, like, did you end up landing that? I'm not even sure. I
did. And then also too, I don't know if you remember, I forgot where it was, but what was the last city that was counting their votes for like the recount? Remember we did the full recount?
I think it was like Georgia, somewhere.
Georgia.
Atlanta maybe. I don't know.
And then like there was like protests outside the voting booth to prevent and like scare people off.
Oh, stop the count.
Yeah, stop the count. Like you had that movement. But there's people who are scared to come out. I mean that type of voter and that fear, you know, of voter suppression, like that's been around since KKK. We're like, you're not going to even cast a vote because we're going to burn your house down if you even try to. And I think, you know, trust me, like fear-based, you know, how would I say it, terrorism is still alive and well in its own ways. And I feel like people surrounding where you go vote to protest and threaten you is it's
difference between protest and threatening though is critical, because there was a lot of threatening.
Exactly.
They were just standing there with signs nicely, peacefully. Okay. But it went beyond that. And even if it was a few people, same reason, you know, once that started with all the protests after George Floyd, I'm like, yo, fuck this. Because you had enough bad actors come in. Didn't matter if there were a lot of good people there. It was just bullshit after a while. And you saw it in cities like Portland and stuff like that. The full circle of this is that it works both ways on things, though. So I think in context, I will say this confidently, Biden won that election, hands down. And he won it by a nice margin. And I think he won it because people really fucking hate Trump, right? Enough people really fucking hate Trump. A lot of people love him, but enough people fucking hate him that they showed up and they voted him out. It does not change the fact, though, that there was some clear bullshit and fuckery going on there. It was obvious. And I will say very confidently that now it's very clear there was not nearly enough to change the result. Not even close. But the hiding of it that occurred was fucking calculated, man. The media suddenly coming out and saying, writing out editorials and adding on TV how voter fraud does not exist. It exists in every election in both directions, no matter what. Even if two people do it, it exists. And they're like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. They were gaslighting the fuck out of people. And then, you know, they just kind of, they declared him president and made this whole thing, and they knew what Trump was going to do. I mean, it was genius. Trump doesn't know how to fucking lose. And so he made a whole thing of it, and he dug his own fucking grave. That's a side issue. I'm looking at it from the extent that they made it so weird that all they had to do was say, oh, we're just going to be transparent about it. Boom. Biden won. But you had all these places that were fucking closing off the polling booths. And maybe it was because they were scared, because people were outside fucking threatening them. I'll buy that. But there were enough fucking cops there protecting the issue going on that, like, and then it was being drawn attention to online that that was a problem. And then the bigger problem came when the tech platforms were censoring it, because that is a bridge we've crossed that is now beyond dangerous and has allowed for certain thought to be okay and other thought to not. And while I agree with some of the thought that they're saying should not be okay, I agree that it's like not. They've already gone past the lines.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a slippery slope, man. So, like, selfishly, do I like not having QAnon fucking be out there telling me there's blockchain ballots with a watermark on them? Yes, I do. I think that's great that's... I can't believe that was a fucking thing. But, like, yes, I think that's great. The problem is, where does it end?
Exactly. And that's something we have to define. I mean, that's a tough one. I feel like I dug myself into a hole with voting.
No.
But I think it's one of those things is how we reform this whole entire system.
Your point should not be lost.
Yeah, for sure.
That you don't want to see voter suppression.
Yeah.
And like some of the people, as I said, advocating for it definitely are trying to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people advocating for it who are not, who are simply saying, like, show a fucking ID.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it happens, dude. And it happens. They proved it. There were Republicans who cheated in this last election. They proved a few cases, at least in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a very, very fair point. But I mean, because you looked at it and you're like, after the election, okay, Biden won. You probably weren't like excited it was Biden, but you're like, okay, I voted for Biden. Really didn't like Trump. This is a net gain for America. Some relief here or whatever. And now, you know, we'll hold him accountable or whatever, which is great. But did you look at that and then also look at what was going on online and question that a little bit and be like, this is a little concerning because one day it could be me?
What can be me?
Censored.
Yeah. I mean, you were right. Like, I voted for Biden, but obviously I wasn't like gung ho. It's unfortunately, I would love an election where I'm not choosing the lesser of the two evils.
Right.
You know, that whole Biden thing when he got on the morning show and he's like, "You're not black if you don't vote for me." And it's like, all right, come on, man. Like, you can't, like, if that's where your mindset is, you're not for us at all.
That was with Charlamagne the guy.
Yeah. I believe it's the morning show or Breakfast Club or whatever.
Shout out to him for keeping a straight face after that. That was bad.
Very bad. But I would love an election where we're not choosing the lesser of the two evils, but also and censorship it's one of those things where it's like there's a line that needs to be drawn because it's like you don't want to promote. We both agree that violence is nothing you should never promote, but at the same time, yeah, censorship is very touchy. It's very touchy. I
mean, we touched it earlier.
Yeah.
A little bit, and then we got off it. But I'll repeat my overall just like tagline there. Like, I will fight for your right to say what I hate that you fucking say.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? And there's also a clear line between people who are, like, now we label everything as hate speech and try to put it in that category of the internet. Certain people on the internet label everything that and try to put it in that category of dangerous, anti-safe talk. And it's causing harm. So they try to put it in the category of this isn't free speech. They're trying to murder me.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, when someone tweets out that like, hey, I see some evidence that this thing happened right here and I'm not really sure why that is, but we need to look into it. They're not trying to murder you. They're trying to start a conversation, even if they're wrong.
Yep. Exactly. And that's what gets back to our point. It's just like, we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that comes with the censorship. We need, who's in charge of social media platforms, the tech platforms, like, certain things should be able to be said. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, I think people are starting to talk more about it, but the censorship of comedians. You know? Like you mentioned Kramer earlier, but...
Well,
you know,
that was fair.
Yeah, but definitely when you talk about, your Dave Chappelle's, your Louis C.K.'s, your, Bill Burr, I think he does it so well. I love Bill Burr. But there's a lot of people out there and they're just like, whoa, like, shut that down. And it's like, I think comedians should be able to say what they feel. Obviously, I would make the joke, but obviously delivery is all, one thing. And also what you're promoting, like hopefully like your joke isn't promoting violence or, stereotypes, and it gets messy. But I do feel like comedians should say what they want.
Yeah, the comedian thing's really interesting to me because the whole point of a comedian is to draw a complete, and it's beyond this, but like complete satire to society. Mm-hmm. They are supposed to attack and offend. It's what it is. I mean, you mentioned Dave Chappelle, but you remember his special, in 2019, I think it was. Remember how much shit that thing got?
Oh, yes.
It was incredible, though.
Yes.
And it's like he was attacking every single thing.
Exactly.
And did you ever see the story he told about the transgender person he had in his audience?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell people that story real quick?
I have to remember.
This was he was talking after the special, giving like an interview about the special. And it was the one where he realized he couldn't tell a joke. Like if he couldn't tell a joke in front of her, he couldn't tell a joke at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was like in a San Francisco club, small club, he noticed that in the front row there was a transgender woman.
Yep.
And he had this whole act on like the alphabet people,
yep.
as he called them and whatever. And he was like, shit, man.
Yeah.
I can't tell this damn joke. But motherfucker. And then he's like, you know what? If I can't tell it in front of her, I shouldn't be able to tell it in front of anyone.
Yeah.
The whole point is to poke fun at everything, including, like, no one's above reproach, including myself.
Yep.
So he told the jokes.
Yeah. And she laughed.
Yes.
She enjoyed it.
Yep.
And like you said, it has to be, it's a satire on reality. And I feel like at certain things, it's forcing a conversation in a lighthearted way, and, even with the show, I remember you and Moose was talking about, you guys mentioned the show Blackish, and it talked about race, all the time in that show, but they put it in a comedic way where, hey, this is stuff that's actually happening, but like we can laugh about it. Like did you ever watch like Blackish? Like
not really.
Regular show? Like,
I brought it up as an example of like the name of the show.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then he gave me context. Which
so it is one of those shows that are, yes, it's aimed at more of African American people, but I feel like everyone watches it because it's just a lighthearted show. But one of the things, like, so he plays a black guy at a marketing agency. He's like one of the top head guys at the marketing agency, and he has like all white. He has a couple of black coworkers, but he has mostly all white coworkers. And sometimes you will hear like he'll sit down and he'll be like, yeah, I don't know why black people are just like, why are you always late? Like, and you like say it at the table, and it's just like, yes, do we want to promote the stereotype that black people are late to things? No, but like we should be able to like laugh at it and be like, all right, here's the ignorant white guy bringing up racial stuff at the table at work, and here's the black guy has to like sit there and take it, but also be like, but also you will see him like, oh man, like why are you late? Like, and like call each other out, stuff like that, and it's like, yes, like don't promote that it's a true thing, but like just sit back, laugh, and it's just a show, and don't take it as fact in the Bible, and it's okay to laugh, and then that's where we get into like it gets messy in terms of like where you draw the line. But I feel like especially in the house of comedy, I feel like it should be a free for all. Well, like we said, as long as you're not promoting violence.
No, I understand. I understand.
Like, yes.
Of course. And like a good example of satire with like violence, even like where it's clearly satire, you have to be a moron to not see it, is like Tim Dillon. I don't know if you've seen his stuff.
I didn't see Tim.
He's hysterical, man.
Yeah.
Like when he does his ads on his podcast, like he has one called Sheath Undies. And so he knows the guy who owns the company. Yeah. And so I forget the guy's name. Let's just call him like Joe. And he's like, and to be clear, you are not just buying this underwear because it's great underwear. Joe is a war criminal. And like his producer's fucking crying next to him. It's true. It's true. He was in Iraq, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and he was at a hospital where an Iraqi woman gave birth to an Iraqi child, and he shot it in the face. Sheath Undies. Use code Tim at checkout. Like, you're an idiot if you think he's serious. It's so black comedy, like crazy dark comedy. It's fucking hysterical.
Yeah.
Listen to this fat guy go off about this sponsor who's a war criminal who's clearly not.
Yeah.
You know, I think he was like, he later ate it. Like, you know he didn't do that.
Yeah.
But like people don't want to see comedy and stuff. They want to see things that they get offended by. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be honest, anybody, if you go out into the world and you want to find ways to be offended, you will find it. Hands down, you will find it.
Yep.
And it goes about how you carry yourself, how you want to live your life. If you want to look for that, fine, you will find it. But that's not the point, and it's not the. We can't tell people to like not laugh and not just enjoy. It's I love Dave Chappelle though. He's a genius. He's a genius. Rest in peace to Paul Mooney.
Paul Mooney.
Paul Mooney. He was on a lot of Dave Chappelle skits back on the Dave Chappelle show days.
Did he just die?
Yeah, recently, probably like a month ago now. But he's also known for, saying like a lot of racial things. So like one of my favorite bits that he did on the Dave Chappelle show was he was like, he did like movie reviews. And then he was like, you know what's dumb? Having a movie called The Last Samurai featuring Tom Cruise. And then he was like, I'm going to start a movie called The Last Black Man on Earth featuring Tom Hanks. And it's like, it's just stupid. And it's just like, but it's like, this context of it is like so true, but it's like also too, it's just like, it's, race can be funny sometimes, like
Sure.
all that stuff. It's all those things that we tiptoe around nowadays. You can find, jokes out of it. And also you find like how it just reiterates how sometimes hatred can be stupid.
Yes.
And how sometimes racism can be very stupid.
Owning it gets rid of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, guys like Dave Chappelle and all of them, I think they just did it really, really well. I feel like Bill Burr does a great job of his delivery. Like when I love it because I live in Harlem right now, but when he was talking about when he had a black girlfriend who lived in Harlem and he was taking the 6 train up and he was like, after 110th Street, there's no more white people. And every street I walk down is named after African-American leader, civil rights leader.
God.
But it's so true. You go up there, it's like Martin Luther King Boulevard. You have Adam Clayton Powell. You have it, but he just does it so well.
And that's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like even sometimes you probably approach this too sometimes, and it's like even when you have conversations about like race or gender, like people are afraid to say black.
They are.
Straight up. Just say black.
Some of the conversations you and I used to have publicly, like back in the day, I think about now. And now, as you can tell, I bring it, right?
Yeah.
Like I do it here. It's whatever. Like people are going to judge me. It's already on camera.
But black is not a negative word.
Could be that.
And the fact that you think it's a negative word shows more.
Crazy. Exactly. It could be that. It could be something else. But like before I ever did this podcast, until maybe a little bit before, there were things that I would subconsciously internalize and not realize that, like, 10 years ago we would have talked about this, no problem. And now I'm stopping myself from talking about it. Yeah. And it's like, there might be a few things in there that could be positive. I could see that. Yeah. But, like, most of it, it's like, wait, why are we giving power to things that weren't meant to have power?
Exactly.
And that's why Dave Chappelle is such a genius, too, because he has no holds barred with stuff.
Not at all.
And I think he might be the GOAT at this point. I know it's like, Pryor and even like Eddie Murphy and some
Red
other
Fox,
guys.
yeah.
Yeah. But like Dave Chappelle's the funniest motherfucker I've ever seen.
Hands down.
He's incredible. He doesn't give a shit.
Not at all. And I feel like we need that mindset. Not to like not give a shit, but it goes into what we were talking about earlier, is like how we just want to call out the buzzwords and say, you're racist, you're wrong, you're sexist, you said this is wrong. And just listen to what they're saying. Listen to the joke or whatever in the comedian's standpoint, and you'll find the common ground if you just listen to what they're trying to say.
I actually want to bring this comedian point though full circle on another thing you said, and this can be a good way to wrap up our convo today. But you were talking about how you recently were saying people are looking to be offended and all that.
You'll find it.
But there was another point. I'm trying to think where it was. I knew where it was in my head a few minutes ago, but you were talking and I just went with it. But what I wanted to get at was when you look online at these people who are looking to be offended.
Yep.
And you see them putting out their virtue signal tweets and, whatever. Do you ever click their profiles?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm not really like a social media
Good for you.
like person. I mean, obviously you're forced to pay attention to it, but like I am a firm believer. I'm not a believer, I'm a believer. I'm a firm believer that when you want to be offended, you can find it. Mm-hmm. And I know, obviously, that racism is alive and well. I do not go on social media to find the next worst thing that happened today. Can I find it? Yes. Should I be knowledgeable about shit that's going down? I mean, yes. I mean, I'm in it. And like, even for, issues that are not my own, I should be paying attention to all the other issues that are going on in this country right now, the world. But I do not spend my day looking for the worst headlines and go deep diving throughout my day.
Yes.
No.
Which is great.
There's a difference between staying informed and taking yourself down a rabbit hole.
Yes.
And I feel like people take themselves down the rabbit hole to the point where they miss out on what's actually happening, or they miss out on how can we find a solution to this issue.
You just reminded me.
Yes.
You reminded me of the thing, why I was bringing that up full circle. It had to do with the problems in this country and how they're common to a lot of people. So when I was saying, do you click their profiles? Obviously, you don't do that as much. Good for you. I click them. Mm-hmm. And when I see these people shutting down and canceling people online, and I see how angry their tweets are or their Instagram stories or whatever, I click their profiles and I'll look through. And I'll, whether it's on Twitter and I read their other stuff or see pictures of them as well, click their profile picture. They're miserable. Mm-hmm. They look beat up, usually. Maybe they're 25, but they look like they're 35. Mm-hmm. They got pink-colored hair. And I'm painting generalization stereotypes right now. This isn't everyone like that. But at the very least, if they don't have a different color hair, they look fucking miserable. Mm-hmm. They're not smiling at the goddamn camera. They are upset. And when you look at them, I'll go dig deeper sometimes and I'll try to find them on LinkedIn or like see if they list what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. They're in jobs, if they are employed, that pay fucking nothing, or they're, unemployed and maybe not even looking, and they've been left behind.
Yep.
They've been left behind by the system. And then after initially going to their profile, being a little pissed off that this person's another cancel culture scumbag who's just calling out people who aren't doing anything wrong in many cases, I then start to feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh man, they don't have any hope. They got no purpose. They have nothing to live for. And they feel like this American dream doesn't exist and it doesn't exist for them. And they just happen to be looking at a set of solutions that in many cases I'll disagree with. Mm-hmm. I don't think are right. But and you could say the same thing about a lot of the QAnon people, by the way. Yeah. That's a really good example. And they're not the cancel culture types, but they're like extremists from the other side. They just couldn't find anything in life, and so this is their battle. Now they go on here and they feel important by, joining these tribes and feeling like they have a sense of self-worth. And that dichotomy right there of the cancelers and the QAnoners in that case, those people go right back to that point where we were talking about solutions, and I told you, in my opinion, the occupiers and the Tea Parties and what came of them are the same thing. They just have different ideas of how to fix it. And what they do is they've been trained to say that they hate each other and realize that they hate each other. Mm-hmm. But really they're pissed off at many of the same things. Yeah. And so you talk about like being offended in comedy and whatever. They're offended also, and they are canceling comedy because they don't want to laugh. Mm-hmm. They are so cynical. Like I always say, I'm a cynic about the world. I can separate that from then being able to have a good fucking time and know that I'm breathing. And like some things I can't fix, but you know what? Life is life, and I'm going to make what I can make. I'm going after my dream right here. I have great friends, whatever. Like I laugh. Yeah. We laugh on here.
Yes.
A lot of people can't laugh anymore.
Yeah.
So it's not just comedians in the sense that people are canceling them. It's that people don't want to fucking laugh because they think there's nothing to laugh about. Yeah. And that's sad.
Yeah, and you also mentioned in one of your other episodes that, and I agreed cold-heartedly, you were talking about the people who
Cold-heartedly?
Cold-hearted. Oh, warm-heartedly. I agree.
Wholeheartedly.
That, what was it? Some of the people that are posting these, aggressive posts about, or canceling another culture and, putting like all these things to be offended by. You know, these are people who have a very loud voice on social media, and are not saying anything in real life in their real voice. I think the words you said, they're all caps on social media, but their words aren't even lowercase.
They speak in upper. Yes. They type in uppercase. The full line. I'll get it right. Yeah. They type in uppercase when they can't even speak in lowercase.
Exactly.
It's true.
Exactly. And also too, I just think it takes the I don't want to say the fight, but it takes the discussion to social media, and it takes it off of the streets. And when I say the streets, I mean like where we can actually create a solution to change this narrative and see what's actually wrong, instead of like we're picking an argument online to look right and get the likes and get the retweets or whatever, but we're not actually turning around, walking outside your door and saying, you know what, I really care about this. How can I fix? Can I? And it's like not fix it by yourself, but like how can I make a difference, whether big, small, or anything? Hey, let me put the phone down and not post a black square. How am I gonna like go out and just make a difference on my own, and like go even beyond, like even if you're anti-protest or stuff like that, fine. There's different ways for you to fight the battle.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, like I said, like it's a system that needs to change, and there's grassroots ways for you to be a part of that change without putting up a post, without marching down with everyone else down the street with a poster. Go out to a local school and tutor.
Yes. Yeah. Social media was invented to connect us, and all it seems to do is divide us.
Exactly.
That's it.
Hands down.
You know, and I don't want to even add anything else to that, because that's such a fucking perfect point. And people are real tough online with ideas, and then they don't do anything, as you said, to put it into action. And it's hard to say.
Yeah.
You know, and like we're taking action here. You came on here.
Exactly.
You know, everyone that's been through this studio takes action, regardless of what they think.
Yeah.
They're putting their thoughts out there. And I, like, when someone agrees to come do this and does it, dude, I respect the fuck out of them. Because they know what they're coming to. They can see the content now online. Like, if they aren't familiar with the show before they come in. They know they're walking into something where we're just going to talk. And, like, ideas are going to be put out, and people are going to agree and they're going to disagree.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what we need.
Exactly.
I mean, I say, if people are listening to this show, if you are listening to the show right now, especially if you don't know me, right? And that's now most of the audience. If you are listening to this and you agree with every single thing that I say, please step back. I don't care, and this goes against paying my fucking bills here as I'm trying to make it, but seriously, like, don't listen for a week and think about that. Because the number of ideas that I put out here, and then even more importantly, that get added to the table by the person across from me who comes from all different walks of life in here, are so insane that the number of things where I'm like, oh, it seems like a good idea, it's not even statistically possible to agree with everything that I think.
Yeah.
And this is something that people that have a platform don't say. And as I build a platform here, I'm going to say it. Because, I disagree. Go run the tape. There are things I say with a guest in one episode that 3 weeks later, things change in society. I'm like, wait, no.
Exactly.
Nope, that's off.
You're like, that didn't age well.
Exactly. Dude, Horo called me. Like, I don't know, 2 weeks after our episode.
Yeah.
And by the way, most of what he said in that episode was like fucking Nostradamus. Yeah. Like, he nailed it. But there were a couple segments that we went into where he called me, like, and he's like, hey. I'm like, hey. He's like, so that part about Cuomo, guess that didn't age too well, huh? And I'm like, listen, dude, like, don't worry about it. No one's gonna care. I'll take the heat. And he's like, yeah, we'll correct the record when I come back on. I'm like, you know, that's what happens.
Exactly.
You know, it's okay. It's okay to, like Earl said, like you said,
it's okay to change your mind. Yeah. It's okay to be wrong.
One last thing, though, before we get out of here, I do want to get to. Just totally switch it up. As we were talking, I don't think the cameras were rolling yet, so I don't know. I don't think we got it on there because we just been fucking sitting here talking all day. But New York, I am, knock on wood here, pretty fucking pumped.
Yeah.
Because when I came up, I visited you among many other people when we all hung out in, I guess, like the end of January. I was really concerned. It was my first time seeing it in person. A lot of people were. Yeah, it was bad. I don't need to go back down that road. We don't need to be negative, but the people had me concerned because the fear was beyond anything I would imagine. And I was at least a little pumped up that the infrastructure looked okay. The city wasn't in fucking tatters. Like, the buildings were there. There wasn't boards everywhere. It looked all right. And I'm like, that can go south fast when the people are leaving and it doesn't look great and there's no funding. But I was concerned. And then in like mid-April, I started to see some signs I liked. And I talked about it with Taylor Ringel when he was down here. And I was like, oh, this looks like it's starting to get there. But I didn't want to say anything yet. And now, end of June, I'm feeling pretty good.
You should.
Okay, you've been there the whole time.
I've been there the whole entire
time. You agree?
Yeah, completely. And I feel like people also need to take into context that New York is one of the biggest cities in the world. Like, if you think about New York, I want to break it down for you in terms of boroughs. Brooklyn outpopulates Philadelphia by itself.
By a lot.
By a lot. There's a lot of people here. So, like, the whole mass exodus and people are leaving the city, even if they did, and they were.
They did.
We're plenty of people still here. And also, too, like, there's only so many people who have the option to leave. One, I didn't have an option to leave. I'm born and raised in New York. But the city was alive and well. And, like, you know, there were people who, I mean, obviously, hopefully people were, when this thing first kicked off, were staying safe about it and not just, fuck it, nothing's happening. Let me just go out anyway. Sure. But at the same time, we stood strong and we innovated ways to, like, you know, keep businesses going. Some did lose their businesses, unfortunately. A lot lost their businesses, but there were others who thrived, and there are others who not like thrived, but they kept afloat, and they found new ways to serve, you know, New Yorkers. You know, it's funny. I feel like such an old man because, like, now, because I'm still getting used to, like, technology. And I remember when I got an iPhone without the home button, I was struggling. I was like, how does this thing work? What do you mean it looks at me? But menus now are all like, you do the QR code. Like, wherever you go, they're all like QR code. They don't really hand out menus anymore. But, you know, I mean, I love that. It's one of those things that are probably just going to continue from now on. The outdoor seating, you know, is another big thing.
Can we talk about how brain damaging some of it was, though? But which, by the way, shout out to the restaurants. I want to be clear. They did what they were told to do.
Exactly.
Huge shout out to all the restaurants in New York. I do not want to do that. But, like, I'm talking about not some of the stuff that's going to stay, like when people, based on the real estate that their location was on, they were able to make, like, gardens and stuff, and now they're going to keep it. That shit's fucking awesome. Yeah. I'm talking about the really stereotypical ones where they were told, oh, you have to have outdoor seating, and they built, like, a fucking log cabin on the street where everyone's crammed in like this with no masks on. It's like, it's not their fault, but, like, what the fuck? You know, the leadership was just so bad during the pandemic.
Exactly. And this was a hard pandemic to navigate. It was... Sure. It was a hard pandemic to navigate, and obviously we can look back and see where, you know, Cuomo, Blasio didn't make the right action and, you know, did the wrong thing. But I think it was also just a very hard, like, if I was one in their seats, I can sit here and tell you I would have made every right decision that could have been made.
Sure.
You definitely figured it out as you went. But be excited for New York. Everything's back open now. There's also just, I feel like there's just so many new things to do in New York now. I mean, New York, you can always have things to do every single day of the week. You'll always find something new to do, find a different neighborhood and everything. But there's definitely, ever since, you know, the pandemic, you know, there's, like, a lot more rooftop bars. I think Governor's Island, they do glamping now. There's, like, tents that they put on Governor's Island. You can go over there and just spend the night there glamping. You know,
glamping.
Glamorous camping.
Come on.
Hey, man, you don't camp in the city.
Come on.
Glamping.
Say glamping with a straight face. Look me in the eyes.
Glamping.
If you're not watching, he did say that with a straight face.
It's real.
I will never say that. Well, dude, I'm pumped to hear that. I love that place. I can't wait to be back up there. And, you know, I was comfortable the entire time, and then when I visited, I did get scared for a little bit there because it's the most resilient city. But I saw all these fucking companies going to Miami and shit. And
let's talk about that because I think that's something that's gonna. There are going to be a few changes to New York. I feel like you're going to see a lot more companies move towards, you know, a lot more remote working opportunities.
Sure, but real fast, I'm just cutting you off for 1 second because we're almost done here. People, what you're hearing right now is my good friends, the lawnmowers outside, trying to tell me to shut the fuck up and end the podcast. I want Josh to go through these points, though, right now. So if you hear a little buzzing in the background, I know that's going to be on there. That's what it is. It's the one thing that can actually get through the soundproof here when they're, like, close and they're literally right outside. So ignore that, but Josh, continue.
No, for sure. But remote working opportunities are going to be, you know, pretty standard. Now, if you're a company and you're spending, whatever $100 million a year on office space in a standard, New York City building, and your productivity level was just the same through this pandemic with your workers working remotely, are you going to spend as much money on as much office space? Maybe you might downsize. I think, you should have office space for when clients, come back in, but do you need as much space? Do you need as many floors? Now, you definitely can hire more people because now you can have productive workers remotely. The level of competition is going to increase.
Sure.
You can be on the other side of the world and be productive as an employee. That's definitely going to, be a thing. Also, too, with, remote working opportunities, I feel like especially as people get older and start to, start their own families, hey, maybe when people turn, 30, 35 and they want to, start a family, maybe they're not staying in the city. And they are moving to the nearby suburban towns.
Which already happens.
Yeah, which already happens. Yeah. I feel like the storyline goes, you graduate college, you end up in Stuytown or like Lower East Side. And then, you find somebody when you're 24, 25, maybe like 26, 27. You move up to the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, get a dog so you can walk them to Central Park. Shout out to all my friends who are actually doing this. And then,
I'm just going to stare right at the camera while you do this because you are fucking nailing it, man.
And then, eventually, you get a mortgage and you get a house in, the tri-state area, Connecticut, New Jersey, and, you call it a day. That's just the usual storyline, but maybe people are going to do it earlier in their lives. I have friends now who are moving to the suburbs because they can and have, an inner city, home office. And get their Peloton so they can keep on top of their workout.
Did you see last week, though, the Morgan Stanley CEO had a great quote. He said he sent a memo to his employees, and he said, I don't want to hear any of this crap about I work in the New York City office, but I'm remote and sit in Colorado. If you want to do that, you're not going to get New York City rate, pal. The reason I respect it is because we do need, like, I understand with the tech industry, they're all about productivity, and this is like counterintuitive to say it like this, but like they're going to go remote, and they should, because it would be like antithetical to what they believe to not do that. But older school businesses like banks and stuff, they're going to come in clutch here because you need them to incentivize people coming to the office at least a little bit because you need to keep people in New York and you need to draw people to New York. We need 20 and 30-year-olds like that demographic going hard to the city to rebuild what certainly does need to be rebuilt. It's great that we're open and got a lot of shit going on. You can't take away the fact that a lot of powerful people left, a lot of companies left, and like they're gone. They got to be replaced. We need to incentivize that. And New York's like the center of the world, so obviously I want to see that happen. Yeah,
and I still have wholehearted faith. Like, young people are coming back. These recent graduates who had like a weird, senior year that was remote, the city's back open, and it's hard to get an apartment like in these like Lower East Side, Lower West Side,
it is
Chelsea.
Now. That's good.
It's applications are flowing, and people want to come back to New York.
I heard rent's back. Like rent is back.
Rent is back.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you stayed in the city, hopefully you lock down one of those 2-year, leases where you can, keep that lower rate for another year. But rent is back and competition's back. So especially during the summertime where college graduates are coming to the city, and now that they can, you be patient because it's going to be a tough competition to get an apartment nowadays.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot I could say to that, but I am pumped to see it moving again. I'm excited to come up and visit you guys again, and that's one that I was starting to feel the other way on out of nowhere, like, oh, I don't know, and I'm very fucking happy that it looks like I'm going to be wrong about that. That's a good one to be wrong about. It's the best city in the world. I don't care what people say. It's the fucking greatest. So you're a lifelong New Yorker, as you said.
As always.
There your entire life.
Exactly.
So anyway, man, the lawnmowers are telling me to end it, as we can hear. But listen, brother, thank you for coming down and doing this.
Thank you for having me, man.
I am glad. I kind of planned it like some of my guys, obviously, like Spear was chomping at the bit. He came on right away because he's Mike Spear. But
shout out Spear.
I had on Ty early on who had helped me out with this whole thing, so he knew what was up. But it's kind of weird, like bringing on some of my oldest best friends is harder for me because I want it to be great and be like when we're always talking. So I hope people get that. But I kind of had to plot it out. I wanted to bring you and Nico in at a similar little era here, so we're moving along, and he was number 51. I think you're going to be like number 54 or so, but I'm glad we could finally do it, see this come to fruition, and, thank you for helping me continue to build, my dude.
Yeah, of course, and hopefully this isn't the last time you see me
here.
It
will not be. It will not be. That's for sure. You got some great hot takes, and you have such a good balance and perspective all in one. I've always said that, and now people will hear it. And I think we need people like you in the conversation. I've had other people in my studio that I say similar things about for different reasons. You know, we need those people in the conversations because they're fucking reasonable.
Yep.
You know, that's it. That's all I want. You know, if we had to have a two-party system where people were reasonable, and again, that can't happen, but sorry.
Yeah.
But if it could, I'd live with that two-party system.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I want to see not have a two-party system, because it can't happen.
Yeah.
You know, so if we're going to have that, we're still going to have a different spectrum of beliefs across there. So I want the people across that spectrum, whatever the fuck it is, wherever they stand, to say exactly where they stand.
Yep. And
then get conversations started, and I think we can come to some sort of great consensus. So happy to bring you here to help me get that message out.
Cheers, man. And I know, like, Spear said it great. You're doing what you are meant to do.
Yeah, man.
You've always had these conversations off camera, and I'm glad people get to see a lot of the great conversations that you had on your day-to-day throughout your life.
Thank you, brother. And one last thing on that, actually.
Sure.
You and I and Dillon, we were fucked up, but we had, when I knew, like, whoa, this is something.
Yeah.
It was right when I was moving to the guest content, which is always what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd done little bits of it with Sydney and Terrence, but at the very beginning, when we went to Dillon's birthday party in Brick, and we sat in his garage after everyone left until like 6 a.m. in the morning and had like a 3-hour wild, the three of us conversation, which, by the way, would love to get Dillon in here.
Yeah.
You got to convince him.
Oh, yeah. Easy.
He's been here. He's been in the studio, but like he's like, you know, he doesn't do this. But Dillon's fucking great. That's our homie. But we were having that convo, and I remember saying at the very end when we were going to bed and the sun was coming up, I was like, I wish we had the fucking mics in here right now. And I was like, this is powerful. Because there was a lot of disagreement,
exactly.
a lot of like common ground. Like, it was awesome. And like, now you see it where we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's a beautiful thing. So, and we're gonna work towards that content where we have two guys across here. By the way,
I'm excited for that.
Little something coming up. But anyway, thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Love you.
It's been real. I love you too, man.
All right, everybody else, give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace.